Alpha the White Beast. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Rain Hart. Chapter 1. The Girl Who Wouldn't Scream. The wheels of the prison cart creaked over the uneven stone road like bone grinding on bone. The scent of iron and mildew mingled with the sour stench of fear that oozed from the girls packed tightly into the wooden cage. 3 of them wept openly. 1 had already soiled herself, and the 4th, Solenne Ashreed, sat in silence. Her face was half-shadowed by a curtain of tangled dark hair, the swell of an old bruise visible along her jaw. A strand of dried blood had cracked and crusted beneath her nostril. She made no attempt to wipe it away. Her hands rested limply in her lap, fingers moving only once, to nudge a small, torn leaf deeper into the wide cuff of her frayed sleeve. "Move," which barked one of the guards as the cart rattled forward. The girls shrank from his voice except Solenne, who neither flinched nor looked up. Someone whimpered beside her. One of the blondes, youngest of the group, no older than 13. "Why aren't you crying?" she asked Solenne in a voice gone hoarse from hours of sobbing. "Don't you understand what's going to happen?" Solenne turned her head slowly, not quite meeting the girl's eyes. "Of course I do," she said simply. And that was all. The girl shuddered and turned away. Through the wooden slats, the Munren trail cut a pale vein through the black hills. The path had narrowed 2 hours ago into a boulder-strewn ravine known as Deadmaw Hollow, and since then, the trees had begun to change. Their trunks bent unnaturally, limbs curled like fingers in agony, leaves black and laced with holes. No birds. No insects. Not even the low drone of wind. Just the clatter of cartwheels and the girl's despair. It would not be long now. The guards had fallen into a tense silence, eyes flicking toward the horizon where a line of spears jutted upward in a forest clearing. There was a wooden palisade there, and behind it, the gate. The gate. It had a name once, Solenne had heard. The Howling Rift. Though no one called it that now. Now, they just said there. Or inside. No one wanted to name the place where the screaming stopped. As the cart slowed, Solenne's thoughts drifted not forward, but back. Ashreed Hollow. A name as hollow as it felt. Her mother had once told her it meant place of the living ash. Trees that burned, but did not die. Her mother had hanged herself from one of those trees. Solenne had been 7. She remembered it with unbearable clarity, the way the rope creaked louder than her mother's body did, the way neighbors stood at a distance, pretending to mourn but secretly satisfied. She remembered her father finding her the next morning, dragging her by the wrist to the edge of town. "Now you're mine," he'd slurred, and later that week, he sold her to the blacksmith for 2 sacks of barley and a half-empty bottle. The blacksmith fed her ashes. Not metaphorical ones. Real ones. Cold gray soot scraped from the forge. "Cleanses the mouth," he used to say. "Burns out the devil in you." He beat her too. Until the day her father took her back and sold her again. 3 times, 3 masters. Each time, worse than the last. By 15, she'd learned to stay quiet. Not out of fear, but because pain made more sense when you didn't narrate it. By 16, she was taken as a tithe. Her father signed her away with a thumbprint in pig's blood. "Won't miss that one," he muttered, and never looked back. So no, she wasn't afraid. She was done. The cart halted with a lurch that sent the weeping girls tumbling into each other. Solenne caught herself with one hand and slipped the leaf into her palm with the other. They had arrived. The guards pulled the doors open with audible reluctance. One even made the sign against corruption on his chest. "Bring the little ones first," said the leader, a scarred man with a twitch under his left eye. 2 girls had to be dragged out. The 3rd tried to run and was promptly struck across the temple with the butt of a spear. Solenne stood up on her own. Wait your turn," a soldier said, surprised. She ignored him, stepping down from the cart with bare, bloodied feet. The others flinched back. Even the guards. "Don't like this one," muttered another. "She's 2, still." "She's resigned," said the one with the twitch. "They don't scream when they're already dead inside." But as Solenne walked toward the outer gate of the rift, one of the handlers, an old man with half a beard and no teeth, actually stepped back and spat on the ground. "She's not dead," he whispered. "She's listening." The gate creaked open on rust-eaten hinges. Solenne stepped inside. The gate slammed shut behind her with the force of finality. From beyond, she heard sobbing, screaming. The other girls pushed in with her. They stumbled. One collapsed outright, sobbing into her skirts. Another pounded her fists against the door, shrieking at the soldiers, who had already turned their backs. "No one comes back," she howled. "You can't leave us in here." But the gate remained shut. The only sound was the girls' panicked breaths and the distant whisper of leaves. No, not leaves. Branches didn't rustle in the rift. There was no wind. Solenne moved away from them, toward the far corner of the enclosure. It wasn't much. Just a clearing of stone and half-dead moss surrounded by trees like claws. The ground was hard-packed and barren. She sat down cross-legged, withdrew the battered leaf from her sleeve, and turned it slowly between her fingers. One of the girls caught sight of it and screamed. "What are you doing?" "That thing's here. It's coming for us." Solenne didn't answer. She raised the leaf to her lips and blew. The note was faint, off-key, and barely held together by breath. It died before it reached the trees. But then the ground trembled. It was subtle at first, like something shifting far underground. Then came the sound, low, like the growl of earth itself remembering pain. It rippled through the soil and up their bones. The girls began to scream again. But this time, Solenne didn't hear them. Because the wind had started. A single gust. Soft. Cool. Scented with rot and something else, something deep and old. The trees groaned, and the sky darkened. A shape moved between the trunks, impossibly tall, gliding like shadow through smoke. Solenne sat perfectly still, the leaf slipping from her fingers. For the first time in a decade, her heartbeat quickened. Not because she was afraid, but because the rift had noticed her. And whatever lived in it was listening. Chapter 2. The forest didn't eat her. The corpse of the youngest girl was still twitching when the second one screamed. It didn't help her. Her voice cracked into a high, pitiful wail just before something enormous surged from between the trees, blotting out what little light seeped through the twisted canopy. A hooked limb, jointed like a spider's, sinewed like a wolf's, slashed clean through her midsection. She split apart like wet cloth, entrails dangling, her scream breaking into silence as her ribcage folded. The third girl tried to run. That was a mistake. The creature didn't pounce. It moved faster than that, so fast it seemed to flicker, as if the air itself couldn't follow its outline. A rush of motion, then bone cracking, then nothing but red mist. Pieces of her clattered across the rocks with a sound like fresh meat hitting wet stone. Solenne stood still. 3 bodies. Not even half a minute. The fourth girl, the one who had been sobbing since they arrived, was now hunched in a fetal position against the trees, clawing her own arms bloody, whispering prayers to gods who wouldn't hear her. Her voice never rose beyond a whisper, and when the wind shifted, it died altogether. Because the thing in the forest had turned. It hadn't made a sound. Its arrival had been thunder, its massacre a whirlwind, but its silence now was worse. It faced her. Solenne didn't run. She didn't move. Her eyes were fixed forward, and in her hand, the half-crumbled leaf trembled between her fingers. She didn't even know why she reached for it. Instinct, maybe. Habit. Madness. It didn't matter. The leaf had veins like scars and edges ragged from years of being folded into sleeves. She pressed it to her lips and blew. No sound. Her breath cracked against her tongue. Her lips were dry. The wind was gone again. And then she saw it. Not the thing. She had seen it already, though not clearly. No one saw it clearly and lived. No. What she saw was its eyes. There were more than 2. Possibly more than 6. They were wrong. Not glowing, not animal, not even monstrous, just wrong. Each held a different kind of color, like shards of shattered moonlight passed through blood. And they were focused on her. Solenne didn't breathe. She couldn't. The monster moved forward, slow now, deliberate. Like it didn't want to startle her. Like it was listening. She heard the wet sound of its joints cracking as it bent low. Its head, or what resembled one, tilted, and from within the shadow of its form, something breathed. Not a growl. Not a snarl. A breath. Deep. Inhaling. It was smelling her. Her. It had torn 3 girls apart without slowing, and now it stood still, inhaling her scent as if trying to memorize it. She didn't lower the leaf. Didn't run. Her knees were shaking, but her face stayed calm. Not because she wasn't afraid. She was. Every cell in her body begged her to collapse, to scream, to curl into a ball and wait for the end. But she didn't. She couldn't. So instead, she blew again. The sound that came was pitiful. A single, broken whistle, thin as thread and sharp as pain. The beast froze. She watched its throat move, watched its enormous frame hitch like something trying to remember a movement it hadn't made in years. It didn't back away. But it didn't kill her either. Solenne lowered the leaf. Their eyes remained locked. The thing breathed again, sharper this time. Faster. Like its hunger had been stirred. It moved again. She felt the air twist around her as it stepped closer. Blood from its claws dripped onto the moss. The scent of it, sweet, coppery, thick, hit the back of her throat. One more step, and it was towering over her. Its mouth opened. Not like a human mouth. Not even like a beast's. This was a maw. A nightmare. Rows upon rows of uneven fangs curled like thorns, some slick with flesh, others jagged as broken glass. It opened wide enough to swallow her whole. Its breath hit her like rot. And still, Solenne did not move. She raised the leaf. Brought it to her lips. And this time, the sound came. Low. Steady. Almost gentle. Not a melody, not truly, but something that remembered music. Like a memory trying to sing. The monster stopped. Mouth still open. But it did not close around her. She saw something, an eye twitch. A claw tremble. A leg shift, as if torn between instinct and something else. It leaned in. Her breath held. Her lips trembled, but the note stayed, held on the edge of exhale. Then, wind. Real wind. Not from the monster. Not from any breath or storm. But from the trees. The branches above them shook. Not violently, but with the light rustle of movement. As if they were listening too. The monster's head turned, ever so slightly, toward the sound. And for just a moment, Solenne saw it. Not its shape, but a silhouette. A posture. A fragment of something once human, crouched in a frame too large, too twisted, too ruined to remember how to kneel. It didn't lower its head. But it stopped breathing. Stopped growling. Stopped everything. It just stood there. Open-mawed. Listening. And Solenne looked up into the mouth of death and blew again. Chapter 3. He was a prince. The moonlight that night tasted like silver and snow, or so he remembered it, etched into the fragments of a memory that had not yet curdled with blood. Kaelen stood on the marble balcony of Munren Tower, wind lifting the hem of his white gold robes. The silver clasp at his collar shimmered beneath the stars, shaped like a hawk in flight, wings curved to cradle a single black jewel. His eyes scanned the southern fields, where torchlines of returning hunters shimmered like fireflies. He could name every man riding in those lines. He had trained with them, bled with them, laughed with them. He was 18. He had never killed a man in cold blood. Behind him, the glass doors of the royal library remained open, velvet drapes fluttering like breathless wings. Inside, a fire crackled low and books lay open across a long table, some of war, some of philosophy, and one unfinished letter to a scholar priest in Kaelen regarding the ethics of sovereign justice. He'd paused the letter when his mother called for him. "Wine tonight," she'd said, smiling from the hearth, already pouring. A quiet hour, just us. No tutors. No counsel. Kaelen, ever the dutiful son, had smiled back and accepted the goblet. She looked radiant, as always. Her crown sat idle beside the fire, forgotten like a trinket. Her hair was woven in coils of jet and pearl, and her gown shimmered like frost over black silk. She looked nothing like a queen. She looked like a story told to lull frightened boys. He took a sip. The wine was sweet. Spiced with anise and something else, an herb, perhaps. Faintly bitter, but warming. He sat across from her, legs crossed, one hand resting on the spine of his bow. "You're working too hard," she said, her voice gentle. "Even gods rest, Kaelen." "Gods don't bleed when they falter," he replied with a faint smile. She leaned forward, fingers wrapping around his wrist. "You are the crown's first light. And its shield. But even shields need tempering. You must rest. Stay still. Let the currents carry others for a while." He frowned faintly, eyes dropping to the wine again. Something swam in his chest, heat, dull and sudden. "Is this the same vintage as last winter's banquet?" he asked. Her smile never faltered. "Similar." His fingers tightened on the goblet. "It tastes." She stood. The room tilted. "Sleep," she said, her voice brushing the edge of lullaby. "Just for a little while." His breath hitched. "Mother." And then her fingers pressed to his forehead. The next thing he remembered was pain. Not the searing, immediate kind. Not yet. At first, it was cold. Then hard. He opened his eyes and saw stone. Ancient, unmarked, veined in red. He was on his knees. Bound. A circle of iron etched with blood surrounded him, glowing faintly as if breathing. Munren Tower had many names. The Watchfire, the Skypiercer, and, in old tongue, the place of purging. The walls of the ritual vault loomed around him, carved with spirals that didn't end, only fed into themselves again and again, like madness written in stone. He tried to stand. Chains burned against his skin. He looked down and saw they were etched with runes. Above him, torches flared to life, one by one, revealing 6 figures in crimson robes. Their faces were hidden. But he knew them. He dined with them. Fought beside one. The high priests. His mother stood at the center. Her gown was different now. No longer silk and pearl, but obsidian folds laced with gold threads that shimmered like veins of fire. The crown was on her head. He tasted metal. "Why?" he asked. His voice cracked. "Why am I here?" Her smile was sad. "You killed your father." The words slapped the air between them. Kaelen blinked. "What?" "He died with your blade in his throat. The guards saw you. You wept like a beast." "No." His voice grew hoarse. "No, that's not true. I never." "You don't remember," she said softly. "The wine. The forgetting root. Necessary to protect your heart. You drugged me. I freed you." He lunged, or tried to. The chains held. "You lied. I spared you from guilt. You murdered the king." Her eyes flashed. He was weak. Kaelen's chest heaved. "And I was loyal. And now you will be eternal." The circle beneath him flared to life. Red light pulsed up through his spine like fire. He screamed. One of the priests stepped forward, lifting a stone rod carved with mirrored script. Another poured black ichor from a chalice into the ring. The air twisted. "Please," Kaelen gasped. "Mother." She knelt, held his face in her hands. "You will be what this kingdom needs," she whispered. "A beast no one can defy. A god of fangs. A shadow to tear down all our enemies. No more doubts. No more softness. No more mercy." His mouth bled. "You were supposed to be king," he croaked. "You will be more than that," she said. "A legend." She kissed his forehead. "For the crown," she said. The ritual began. Fire surged through his bones. His skin cracked. His nails blackened and curled. His scream broke against the walls, splintering into something no longer human. The priests chanted. The ring spun. The air howled. Kaelen convulsed. Blood poured from his eyes. His vision split. He saw himself, reflected in the obsidian altar. A boy no longer. His spine split open. Flesh sloughed from his hands in sheets. Muscle warped. Bones lengthened. He screamed again, except it wasn't a scream. It was a roar. One that shook the mountain. Outside, the stars went out for a moment. The priests recoiled. One fell, his face burnt from the inside. Kaelen's eyes shattered, pupils rupturing, iris flooding white, then black, then red. He looked at his mother. She was still smiling. "You'll never be alone," she said. "You'll always have your kingdom." Then the spell took hold. His limbs snapped out of alignment. His breath choked. His throat tore itself into something new. And Kaelen, Prince of Light, heir of honor, beloved of the people, was gone. In his place stood a thing the world would come to call only one name. Monster. Chapter 4. The Monster They Made. The chains groaned as they dragged him toward the light. Kaelen no longer knew his name. It was there, somewhere, scratching at the corners of thought like a splinter buried under skin. But every time it tried to rise, it burned. Every time it whispered through the remnants of his mind, a voice rose louder, colder, and tore it down. The voice was hers. "You are no longer Kaelen," Queen Morel had said. "You are no longer boy, nor son, nor prince. You are mine." The chains were ruined with old language, deep-blooded, drawn through centuries of sacrifice. They sang as they pulled him across the temple floor. Not with melody, but with power. Magic that hurt simply to hear. Magic that ate. They dragged him down the final steps of the ritual vault and into the night. Outside, the world gasped. Winds howled through the canyon mouths. Stars blinked behind black clouds. At the base of the moon-rend cliffs, a great circle of soldiers stood waiting in trembling silence, blades sheathed, eyes lowered. None looked directly at him. They didn't need to. They could feel it. He was no longer clothed. His body could no longer wear cloth. His skin had burst, peeled, reforged. No two limbs were identical. One arm stretched longer than the other, tipped in fingers that curled backward like scythes. The other was a claw, twisted and gnarled with blood-veined bone, jointed wrong. His spine had arched into a crescent of bone. Veins glowed faintly beneath skin that barely looked like flesh anymore. The color of old rust, scaled in some places, open in others, seeping steam and rot. His legs had become limbs made for leaping, landing, rending. Hoofed at the ends, but split like talons. When he stepped, stone cracked. His mouth was no longer a mouth. It was a wound that opened sideways, surrounded by tusks that had once been teeth. And his eyes. 6 of them. Each held the color of something sacred profaned: opal, wine, ash, smoke, blood, bone. One twitched constantly. Another blinked slowly, like memory trying to wake. And they all saw her. Queen Morel stood on the high platform overlooking the rift, her voice ringing clear across the canyon. "People of the crown," she said, arms outstretched. "Tonight we seal the blood pact of 1,000 years. Tonight we reclaim the sacred forest. Tonight," she gestured down to the abomination shackled before her, "we unleash our divine war beast." The soldiers did not cheer. Most remained frozen. A few crossed themselves. The priests began to chant. Kaelen twitched. The sound hurt. It crawled along the back of his skull. He could no longer cover his ears. He could no longer say stop. The chanting grew louder. And then the queen stepped forward, her footsteps light as snow. She descended the stairs slowly until she stood directly before him. She looked up into his many eyes and whispered, so only he could hear, "You were the best of us. That's why I chose you." He snarled. Or tried to. No voice came. "Do not look at me that way," she said, with a sigh. "There must be a monster. The world demands one. And I will not give them my second-born. He is too weak. Too soft. But you were always strong. She reached out. Touched his face. He recoiled. Chain snapped taut, forcing him back down. You had his eyes, she murmured. My father. The first king. He, too, was devoured by duty. She pulled a rune-carved blade from her sleeve and drew it across his chest. Blood welled, not red, but blackish gold. It hissed as it hit the ground. You will not remember your name, she intoned. Kaelen's jaw tightened. You will not remember language. His throat closed. Something snapped. You will not remember love. He screamed, except there were no words in it. The chain shattered. The priests dove aside. The soldiers ran. He surged upright in a burst of muscle and hunger and noise. And the queen smiled. Go, she whispered. Feed. Fight. Be legend. And he did. They opened the gate of the Howling Rift at dusk. The forest devoured him. He did not walk into it. He fell into it, like a blade dropped from a trembling hand, sharp and senseless and soaked in blood before he even touched ground. For 3 nights, he did not stop moving. He killed without rest. Without mercy. Without pause. The first patrol from the rift was torn in half within seconds. The second tried to retreat. They were found shredded along the whispering pines, bones gnawed, armor flattened into ribbons. On the 3rd night, something darker moved across the far ridge. A presence that did not fear him. That watched from the trees with eyes of polished silver and violet flame. Silheth. He wore no armor, bore no weapon. His cloak shimmered with constellations that didn't match the sky. And his smile was long. You made it real, he whispered, half laughing. You fed your favorite son to the very forest that hates you. Behind him, ghost-eyed warriors of the rift fanned into the shadows, watching. Monster, Silheth breathed. I wonder how long you'll stay hungry. Kaelen saw him. Smelled him. Rage surged, but the trees held him back. He turned. The wind brought new scent. Something different. Softer. Not blood. Breath. The girl. He didn't know her name. But he remembered the shape she made in the silence. He remembered that she didn't scream. Not like the others. She had not bled when he passed her. She had not begged. She had lifted something to her mouth, a shape he couldn't name, but which made a sound. And when it happened, he had stopped. Now, crouched beneath moonless trees, blood still wet between his claws, he felt it again. The memory. The sound. The stillness that wasn't fear. He moved toward it. His claws curled against the earth, trying to slow. Trying to fight the gnawing that had started in his gut again. The hunger. It was back. It was always back. He burst from the thicket and saw her. Alone. Face dirty. Lips cracked. Holding the leaf. She blew. He froze. She looked at him, not like a girl at the end of her life, but like something trying to listen. His jaws opened wide. Blood from a dozen bodies still painted his tongue. But she blew again. And again. And, behind her, footsteps. Armor clanked. Torches. Voices. Soldiers. Coming fast. He wanted to run. He wanted to tear them. He wanted to stop breathing just to keep from smelling her. But instead, he stepped back and disappeared into the dark. Chapter 5: The Girl Who Didn't Flinch. The blood reached her ankles before she realized it was not her own. Solenne stood in the clearing, arms limp at her sides, the frayed hem of her dress soaked in the thick, dark remnants of someone else's final moment. She did not tremble. Not because she was brave. Because she was tired. Somewhere behind her, a soldier retched. Another cursed and walked away. No one helped her. No one asked if she was hurt. Because she wasn't. Not visibly. Not enough to matter. Her skin, smeared with red, remained unbroken. Her throat uncut. Her eyes, still open and dry. She should not have been breathing. 3 girls had entered the rift that night. Only she had come back. And the others hadn't just died. They had vanished, torn, shredded, chewed. Nothing left to bury. Nothing to name. Only Solenne. Alive, silent still. She didn't look at the observers gathered just beyond the forest gate, the priests scribbling notes, the soldiers sharpening blades that would never pierce what lived within. Nor did she meet the eyes of the envoy from the crown, cloaked in royal purple, standing beside a white-plumed steed as if this were just another ceremony. Her gaze remained on the trees, waiting for them to open again. They did. 2 days later. "You'll go again," said the priest who arrived at her cell, his breath stale with spiced wine. "He didn't eat you. That means something." Solenne said nothing. "Perhaps you were the wrong flavor," he added, laughing at his own joke. She still said nothing. By nightfall, she was once again marched along the edge of the Howling Rift, down the twisted stone path that led into the cursed treeline. She was not bound. They didn't think it was necessary. Where would she run? Who would she run to? No one. She didn't even look back as they pushed her through the gate and shut it behind her. The forest swallowed her again. This time, she didn't wait. She walked deeper. Her feet knew the path already, though there was no path. Just roots and rot and the scent of something hungry. She stepped over bones she hadn't seen the first time. One still had an earring attached, gold, curled like a bird wing. The trees sighed. The wind shifted. The silence grew thicker. He was coming. She felt him before she heard him. The earth moved, not enough to knock her down, but enough that the leaves twitched and the air turned warm, damp, thick. Like breath. Then came the growl. Not from ahead, but above. She looked up. He dropped like a falling mountain. Claws gouged into soil beside her. Teeth glinted. She didn't scream. She didn't move. He landed inches from her, so close she could smell every corpse he'd eaten this week, every torn tendon, every buried memory clawing its way through his scent. His form loomed, bulk eclipsing the moonlight, so vast he had to hunch beneath the canopy. He was bigger than before. Hungrier. The glow from his veins had grown brighter, red now, not gold. His 6 eyes glimmered like stained glass smeared with rain. And they were all locked on her. Solenne took a breath. The leaf in her hand was nearly ruined, its edges curled from last night's storm, its center torn from her grip. She pressed it to her lips anyway. And blew. The sound was weaker than before. But it was sound. He froze. Just enough. Just long enough. His claws scraped once against the ground, as if caught between lunge and retreat. Then, slowly, he began to circle her. He didn't walk like an animal. Didn't stalk like a beast. He moved with something else, something confused. Uncertain. Like he was waiting. Like he was asking a question he could no longer phrase. He circled left. Then again. Each step cracked a branch. Shook a leaf loose. Sent a tremor into her knees. But she stayed still. She let the leaf fall from her lips. And whispered, "You're starving." He halted. 6 eyes narrowed. His head lowered, breath washing over her in waves of heat and iron. "I know," she said, voice shaking now, barely above a breath. "You're always starving, aren't you?" He growled. Not loud. Not threatening. Just wounded. Solenne turned her face to the side, half listening for the soldiers she knew were watching from the far cliffs. They wouldn't interfere. Not unless they thought he was about to waste his appetite. Her knees gave. She sank to the ground beside a twisted root, back pressing against a tree older than any city. Her limbs shook. But she didn't run. She met his gaze. "You're trying," she said. The monster's shoulders rose and fell with each breath, steam hissing through vents along his ribs. Blood still glistened on his claws from something not long dead. His mouth twitched. Then he did something new. He turned his head away. Just for a moment. Then back again. Solenne's heart stuttered. "You remember, don't you?" she whispered. She didn't expect an answer. But the way he shifted, the low, guttural rumble from deep within, was something. He stepped closer. Her breath caught. Then his mouth opened, wider than before. Rows upon rows of teeth gleamed, slick and jagged. His tongue curled, and for one moment, the rift's cold air felt like fire against her skin. He lunged. Not at her. To her. He pressed his head against her shoulder. And licked. The warmth of it jolted through her like lightning. The contact wasn't gentle. It left saliva and pressure and the unmistakable touch of something that could destroy her in a second. But it didn't. His tongue passed over her collarbone, up to the hollow of her neck. His breath hitched. His jaw trembled. And then his teeth followed. Not biting. Not yet. Just resting there. Against her skin. Cool. Deadly. Real. Solenne's pulse thundered. She didn't flinch. Are you, she whispered, trying not to eat me? His entire body shuddered. The trees around them groaned. The wind screamed. And he backed away, mouth still open, something between a snarl and a cry breaking from his throat. But he did not leave. He turned his massive body once more. And began to pace again. Chapter 6. The Beast Who Eats. The stone was slick with old blood. Solenne could feel it seeping through the thin cloth of her shift, gluing her back to the column where they'd bound her. Her arms had been lashed above her head, wrists chafed raw, feet barely touching the moss-slick floor. She didn't struggle. She'd learned long ago that pain did not grow less when resisted. The priests had not spoken to her on the way here. They didn't look at her, not as a person. One muttered prayers. Another kept eyeing her like he was waiting for her to spontaneously combust. Perhaps he thought she would. She didn't. She only stood, watched, listened. They'd walked her past the other girls, new ones now, fresh from the city pens. Their eyes had followed Solenne's bruised silhouette as if it might foretell their fate. Some had whispered. One had asked if she was a spirit. No one answered. The stone circle was ancient, carved into the bones of the forest where even sunlight bent wrong. Moss grew in veins down the cracked columns, and the runes etched into the center stones pulsed with an old, breathing warmth. This was the place they fed him. Kaelen. She could not speak his name aloud. She doubted he remembered it. She had not meant to know it. But it had come to her in a dream, a word spoken not in voice, but in shape and scent, in memory carved behind eyelids. A whisper in the trembling edge of sleep, just after his tongue had dragged across her collarbone, and just before the bloodless bite that never came. Kaelen. The monster. He was coming again. She heard it in the leaves first. Then the bones. They shook beneath her feet, still bound but wide awake, still straining to stay calm as the scent of smoke and iron and old decay reached her lungs. She did not scream. She didn't call out. Her lips remained pressed together, even as she felt the first crackle of breath against the edge of her foot. It was wet, rank, and hungry. The trees shuddered. The leaves curled. Then he came, like a curse spat from the belly of the world. The monster burst into the circle in a cascade of limbs and teeth, steam hissing off his shoulders where the moonlight touched him. His claws scored deep gashes into the ground, 6 eyes flaring as they found her immediately, as if nothing else existed. He roared. The sound shattered something in the air. Birds flew miles away. The stone behind her moaned. She did not flinch. He was bigger again. The change wasn't just size, it was gravity. Presence. The way the forest seemed to bend toward him, and the light didn't quite reach where it should. Blood stained his jaw, still fresh from a kill. And then he smelled her. His head snapped sideways. Sniffed once. Twice. She watched his massive body tense, something twisting in his spine like a spring pulled too tight. Then, he lunged. The ground cracked. Debris flew. Stone exploded beside her. She didn't close her eyes. She just waited. The impact never came. She opened her eyes. He was inches away. His breath thundered against her ribs. His claws dug into the column on either side of her shoulders, chipping the stone. His mouth hung open, wide enough to fit her whole. She could see bits of human flesh stuck between his teeth. And yet, he didn't bite. He growled. Low. Dangerous. But he didn't strike. Her hands ached from the ropes. She couldn't raise the leaf. Couldn't blow the note. All she could do was watch him unravel. Because that's what was happening. He was shaking. Trembling. One of his legs gave slightly, the joint buckling. His breath came faster, hotter, wetter. His eyes rolled between her face and her neck and her stomach, and then back again, jaw twitching with an agony she could feel in her marrow. She didn't speak. Even if she could have, there was nothing to say. She just closed her eyes. And waited. A priest screamed from somewhere behind the columns. It's starving. It should have, gods, it should have already. Another voice, it's resisting. It's by the flame, it's holding back. The growl deepened, then stopped. She opened her eyes again. The monster's eyes were all on her. Unblinking. Bleeding light. His claws curled against the stone, digging into the grooves where the runes burned dim. He leaned closer, pressed his nose to her throat. She thought he would rip it out. Instead, he inhaled. Long. Deep. As if he were trying to breathe her in without touching. As if scent alone could feed him. He licked her again, once, down her shoulder, slow, deliberate. The tongue left a searing trail of wet that cooled in the open air. But his teeth brushed the wound the priests had opened earlier, where they'd sliced her arm to make her more appetizing. Blood dripped. His whole body convulsed. And still, he didn't bite. She whispered, without moving her lips, "You're starving." He groaned. The sound was unbearable, like someone being torn open from the inside. He dragged himself back. Not all at once. Not quickly. But deliberately. One step. Another. Then he turned and vanished into the woods. Silence fell. The priests did not speak for a long time. Then came the sound of boots. Of chains. Of ropes untied. Solenne collapsed to her knees, head spinning. She didn't cry. Couldn't. Even as her skin burned from the graze of claws. Even as blood soaked her side. Even as hands roughly seized her again. She was half dragged, half carried back toward the outer path, limp but conscious. She heard them whispering. He spared her again. Unbelievable. Next time, he'll finish it. Someone spat. Another murmured, or she'll finish him. Chapter 7. The Girl Who Didn't Die. The cuffs around Solenne's wrists were lined with velvet. It was the only softness afforded to her in the Judgment Tower. The rest was stone and steel, cold, calculating, and draped in silks to pretend otherwise. She stood barefoot in the center of a circular chamber, surrounded by tiers of velvet-draped balconies. Men and women in gold-trimmed robes lined the rows, their gazes heavy, their silence louder than any verdict. Above them all, on a dais of polished obsidian, sat the queen. Morel's fingers were laced beneath her chin. Her dark crown glinted in the lamplight, a thing of thorns and twisted metal. She did not speak immediately. She watched. Solenne didn't lower her gaze. She hadn't blinked once since they dragged her here. To her left, Prince Alric lounged in the shadows, dressed in mourning black. He didn't look at her, only twirled a wine ringlet around his index finger, bored or calculating, maybe both. The room smelled of orange blossom and dust. Somewhere beneath it, the scent of blood clung to Solenne's skin like a memory that refused to rot. Finally, the queen spoke. "She has not died," Morel said, voice smooth, cool, steady. As if speaking of a horse that had outlived its usefulness. "A second time, your majesty," murmured one of the high priests. 3 full contact rituals. 2 direct presentations. He has not bitten her. The queen's brow lifted the slightest degree. "Curious," she said. "Monsters do not grow fond of their meat." Another murmuring wave rippled through the balconies. Solenne remained still. A tremor beneath her heel betrayed that she was still, in fact, alive. Alric stepped forward, leaning onto the edge of the stone banister. His smile was sharp. "Perhaps," he drawled, "our beast finds her unpalatable." You did say she's a lowborn, did you not? No noble blood, no title, no seat of inheritance. Just soot and ash and silence. Solenne said nothing. Yet, Morel cut in, she survives. And more than that, he stops. She stood. The chamber held its breath. Every other offering is devoured in seconds. Screams, torn limbs, the usual, she continued. But her, he lingers. He watches. He circles. Morel's gaze lowered like a blade. He remembers. That word landed like a curse. Solenne felt it like a hook behind her ribs. He is not supposed to remember, the queen continued, each syllable a deliberate wound. Memory is a flaw. An open window in a sealed vault. We created a weapon, not a pet. One of the younger priests hesitated. And yet, Majesty, she calms him. No, Morel said. The word cut sharp and final. She does not calm him. She delays his hunger. The queen descended from her platform, robes brushing over each step as she moved toward Solenne. They stood a breath apart. Solenne could see the faint lines at the corners of the queen's mouth, etched not by age, but by careful containment. You are not special, Morel said, softly, almost kindly. Solenne didn't reply. You are not chosen. You are not loved. Still, she was silent. You are, the queen said, raising her chin a leash. Then she turned, robes swishing behind her like a living thing. Bring in the noble girls, she commanded. If he won't bite her, he will feed on better blood. Let us remind him of the flavor he was shaped to crave. The door opened. 2 girls entered. Both were lovely. Both terrified. One wore the signet of House Varel, the other of Ettenhall, lesser branches of the crown, cousins and cousins of cousins. They didn't scream. Yet, they would. Solenne did not look at them. She kept her eyes forward. By the time she was returned to the observation chamber, a stone tower carved into the side of the Howling Rift, its single wall open to the trees, it was already over. She heard it before she saw it. The wet sound of flesh unspooling. The grunt of muscle stretching too wide. The slap of something thick hitting stone. Blood. The girls had not lasted long. Solenne sat where they told her to sit. They no longer bound her. They didn't need to. Across the gap, beyond the observation window, the monster stood in the dark. Kaelen. Not his name. Not to them. But to her. His 6 eyes burned with a hunger newly fed, and yet, still present. His body glistened with gore. Bone spears jutted from his spine. Veins pulsed against sinew. And yet, he didn't come closer. He watched her. She watched back. A thin breath escaped her. You didn't want them, she said, voice barely above wind. You were told to. The monster shifted. 1 step closer. His clawed fingers curled in the soil, twitching. I'm not calming you, she whispered. I'm just the pause between bites. She understood it now. They would keep her alive only long enough to keep him angry. She was the silence between storms. The breath before the scream. The only thread tying him back to memory, and they would use her until it snapped. A priest approached from behind, whispering, You're to stay with him now. Always. Until the moment he decides you're worth the taste. Solenne said nothing. The monster's head tilted. His tongue slid across one tusk. But his feet didn't move. He looked at her like she was something he didn't know how to want. Yet. Chapter 8, Blood Before the Battle. The stones of the altar were still wet with neck blood. Solenne stood at its edge, watching as the red ran down through the carved gutters, forming rivers that poured into the runes etched beneath. The patterns pulsed once, then again, each beat brighter than the last, as if the forest itself were swallowing the sacrifice and waking. Around her, heads rolled from their bodies in a grotesque rhythm. One after another, the prisoners dropped to their knees, and the priest's blades did the rest. No names were read. No crimes were listed. The captives were mostly Rift border peasants and a few unlucky scouts from the cracked flanks of the Silheth resistance. Their faces blurred together, shock, Pain, disbelief, silence. Solenne did not look away. She didn't need to. She could hear it all. Blood splashing into bowls. Muscles twitching in the aftershock of death. The muted grunts of the executioners, cloaked in dark linen, their arms practiced, their faces blank. The air reeked of iron and damp wool. The queen stood atop the stairs, half shrouded in her cloak, a gleam of satisfaction beneath her veil. "Let them see," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Let the forest taste what waits when it is loyal, and what it may lose when it disobeys." A priest turned toward Solenne and gestured. She stepped forward. No struggle. No hesitation. Her place was already waiting, a flat stone platform above the others, where the final lines of the blood sigil awaited completion. The blood from the sacrifices pooled there now, slick and steaming in the morning chill. Solenne climbed the steps. Her bare feet met stone, damp and red. She stood in the center of the sigil, surrounded by concentric circles of bodies. Some were still twitching. Some had already begun to stiffen. The priest did not speak. She did not ask. Instead, she pulled the leaf from her sleeve. One she'd plucked the day before, already starting to dry. She brought it to her lips. And blew. The sound was thin. Brittle. Not music. Just breath through a dying thing. The blood didn't answer. But the forest did. It groaned. It heaved. And then it screamed. The trees on the horizon bowed violently inward, as if pushed by a wind no one else felt. Leaves curled midair. Birds exploded from the canopy in frenzied flight, and then were gone, scattered like ash in a storm. He came out of the rift like a landslide with teeth. Kaelen. Not the name they called him now. Not the curse they chanted in secret. But to her, still that one name, like the ghost of a person she was beginning to remember. But there was no person in him now. Only teeth. And rage. He crashed onto the altar, his claws rending stone, his body twice the size it had been before. His eyes bled light, and his mouth was already stained with fresh gore, his own or something else's. It was impossible to say. The soldiers flanking the site fell to their knees. Some ran. He didn't notice. His focus locked on her. The scent of blood had brought him. But hers was different. He could smell it, even through the reek of death. He could taste her on the air. The one he didn't eat. The one who didn't scream. He lunged. Solenne blew again. The leaf let out a weak warbling note, like a bird caught in its own throat. The sound hit him. But it didn't stop him. He faltered for only a breath. And then came on. She didn't run. She couldn't. He was too fast. He was over her in a second, claws cracking through the stone platform, teeth wide, eyes blinding. She thought, this is it. Not with fear. With clarity. The moment the leaf no longer worked. She closed her eyes. Something tore. Stone shrieked. The altar exploded beneath her. Not from impact. From his weight. He'd struck too hard, claws digging into the runes, cracking the foundation. The sigils ruptured. The blood hissed. A massive stone slab shifted beneath her and broke open. She fell. Hit the ground hard. The roar above her shattered the remains of the platform. Dust rained down. Something enormous moved overhead. And then, silence. Not absence of noise. The kind that follows death. When she opened her eyes, she saw him crouched over her. Breathing. His jaw was parted just enough for his fangs to rest against her collarbone. One press, and it would split her spine. He didn't press. But his whole body shook. She lay beneath him, breath catching in her throat, her side burning from the fall. Her leg might have been broken. Her shoulder definitely was. "Still," she whispered, "you're trying." He snarled. But there was no fury in it. Only pain. Then, another scream. Not hers. A soldier, somewhere behind them, had crept too close. Kaelen turned on him in an instant. What happened next was not a fight. It was a lesson. In what the monster could do when not holding back. He tore through the ranks like a hurricane laced with bone and fire. Claws sheared through armor. Fangs split skulls. When arrows flew, he swatted them away. When horses charged, he leapt, landed on their backs, and split them down the middle. The queen watched from afar, satisfied. But Solenne, on her back, half buried in dust and cracked bone, saw something else. Kaelen wasn't enjoying it. He wasn't playing. He was emptying himself of everything. And when it was over, when the soldiers were gone, the field soaked, the runes drowned in red, he returned to her, quiet, trembling. He didn't touch her, just stood, watched. And then the sound. It didn't come from his mouth. It came from somewhere deeper. A low, shuddering sound, part breath, part growl, part grief. Like something remembering what it used to be. Solenne sat up slowly. Blood stained her from neck to thigh. The leaf was gone. But she didn't need it. Not then. Not with the sound he made. Like a beast trying to cry. Chapter 9. The Monster That Circles. The night after the slaughter, no one slept. Not in the towers, not in the courts, and especially not in the prison wing perched against the black wall of the Howling Rift. The walls there were old, older than the queen's bloodline, older than the kingdom itself. They wept when it rained and creaked when it didn't. The cells were stacked like cages for meat, narrow and tall, with windows cut just wide enough to tempt a view but not grant it. Solenne had never cared for windows. Until she noticed the sound. It started low, rhythmic, like dragging stone. The guards thought it was shifting roots. The trees in the rift moved sometimes. But roots didn't breathe. She knew it was him. Kaelen. She pressed her palm to the cold stone beneath the sill, fingers splayed like she was listening through her skin. The sound came again. Drag. Pause. Drag. Another pause. Longer this time. Like breath. She stood on the narrow cot, bare feet silent on the thin mattress, and leaned toward the barred window. At first, she saw nothing. The forest beyond was dark, pulsing with the quiet dread of aftermath. But then the shadows moved. He stepped from them. Not charging. Not stalking. Just pacing. His claws carved into the earth like they were plowing through water. He moved slow, deliberate, endless. Around the base of the tower. One full circle. Then another. And another. Solenne counted 7 loops before her breath began to catch. He was tracing something. Over and over. The same shape. It was only when the moon broke through the clouds that she saw it, faint at first, then unmistakable. Claw marks. Not slashes. Lines. Curves. One circle. Then another. Then an arc. The final sweep carved deep into the soil, curved with near reverence. An S. Her name. Or the beginning of it. Her heart stumbled. Not from fear. From recognition. He didn't look up. Didn't try to enter. He simply kept moving. Slow. Restless. Like a thought that refused to settle. Outside her cell, the guards had grown more nervous by the hour. 2 had already requested transfers. 1 had stopped eating. They called it the prelude. The moments before the next frenzy. No one believed it was grief. No one but her. In the court above, the queen's advisors argued in tight voices behind closed doors. "He's circling the prisoner's tower," hissed one of the high priests. "It's fixation. It's decay," said another. "He's unraveling." We knew there was a threshold. Emotional persistence was always a risk. "Shall we increase offerings?" someone suggested. The queen had been silent for most of the meeting. She stood at the high window, looking toward the rift, eyes unblinking. "No," she said at last. Heads turned. "We do nothing." A pause. "Majesty?" She turned slowly. "He circles the girl. He does not break in. He does not howl. He waits. That is control." Murmurs rose. "And if it fails?" Ulrich asked from his seat in the shadows. "If this leash slips? Then we give him what he wants," Morel said. "And if what he wants is not food?" She did not answer. Solenne, meanwhile, had begun to practice. She tore leaves from the cracks in the stone near the window. She crushed them, rolled them, breathed through them, searching for a tone longer than the ones she had used before. She needed a sound that lasted. Not a note. A tether. It had to be more than instinct. It had to be memory. She blew softly, eyes closed, imagining his shape in the dark. The weight of him. The heat. The pressure of his breath at her throat. The scrape of fangs that had not yet closed. Outside, his pacing stopped. For a moment, she thought he was gone. Then, scrape. A new line. She peeked through the bars. A second curve had joined the S. No. He was spelling it. She backed away, hand on her chest, unsure whether her lungs had forgotten or her heart had. The sound of boots startled her. She turned. The cell door hadn't opened. But someone stood inside anyway. Ulrich. How he'd gotten in, she didn't know. He leaned against the wall like he belonged there, arms folded, smile thin and cruel. "You sleep through storms, girl," he said. She said nothing. He pushed off the wall and stepped closer. "You've become interesting." Still silence. He walked to the window, peered through the bars. He's still down there. Solenne's hands clenched. Ulrich turned back. "I wonder what he sees in you," he said. "Not beauty. Not blood. Not power." She met his eyes for the first time. "I survived," she said quietly. He chuckled. "Yes, you did. Twice now. 3, if we count that mess on the altar." He circled her once, slowly, like a man inspecting a weapon. "Mother thinks you're a fluke," he said. "The priests think you're dangerous." He leaned in, breath warm against her cheek. "I think you're useful." She didn't flinch. He smiled wider. "If you can stop him from howling, if you can make him wait, I'll keep you breathing." He paused. "But the moment you fail, I'll be the one who gets to kill you." Slowly. He stepped back, smoothed his coat, and vanished into the corridor as silently as he'd come. Solenne waited, then turned back to the window. Outside, in the dirt, another claw mark had joined the name. A letter half formed. She pressed her lips to the leaf again. And blew. Chapter 10, Offerings and Orders. The blood hadn't dried on the last altar when the next order was given. Inside the War Council chamber, Queen Morelle stood in shadow. No lamps had been lit, and the only glow came from the sickle moon beyond the narrow windows, slicing light across the obsidian floor like a warning. The priest knelt in the center of the room, head bowed, robe damp with the damp sweat of urgency. He'd just delivered a name. Silheth. A name they didn't dare whisper often. But tonight, it had been spoken. And not in rumor. In confirmation. "He crossed the Wirem 2 nights ago," the priest said. "He will be at the rift before week's end." Morelle's fingers tapped the edge of her throne. The hall waited. Beside her, Prince Ulrich watched with mild interest, like a boy watching a chess piece inch toward his side of the board. She didn't look at him. Instead, she turned to the gathered priests and said, "It's time." A breath passed through the room. One of the oldest priests, a man with scars in place of eyebrows, shifted uneasily. "You mean the air cavity protocol?" "I mean the tether," she said. "If the beast is to be our final blade, it must strike when and where we order it." She took a slow step forward, her crown casting twisted shadows behind her. "It must not choose." The word landed cold. "But, Majesty," the priest said carefully, "there is no precedent for embedding human spirit into bestial inner senses. The mind may fracture." "Let it," Morelle said. She smiled without teeth. Let her fracture. Ulrich finally straightened. "You want to embed the girl?" "She is already the only thing it hears," Morelle said. "We simply make that literal." Solenne sat in her cell, unaware of the words being exchanged above her. But she felt the shift. The way the guards moved quicker now. The way their hands hovered near weapons they never drew. The way the earth itself seemed taut, like a bowstring drawn too long. She'd dreamed of Kaelen again last night. Not the monster. The man. He'd been standing in a garden that could never have existed, his face whole, his eyes still gold, not bloodlight. He hadn't spoken, but he looked at her like she was a question he wanted to remember the answer to. When she woke, her lips tasted like leaves. The guards came at dawn. They didn't chain her. That was new. Instead, they walked her through the eastern gate, down a path carved only recently, stone steps wet with moss, torchlight glinting off runes that hadn't yet settled into silence. At the end of the path was a door. Massive. Sealed. She recognized the pattern on it. It was the same as the mark on Kaelen's chest, where the chains had first broken. She stopped. The guards pushed her forward. She didn't resist. They opened the door. Inside, the Temple of the Rift pulsed like a wound that had never healed. Walls curved inward, black stone shot through with veins of red, like blood trying to claw its way back into the mountain. In the center, a slab. Not stone. Bone. Rib bone, curved into a cradle. She was led to it. Stripped. Laid down. Ropes bound her not at wrists or ankles, but across her throat, her hips, her temples. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. She understood. They were going to open her mind. Insert her into him. And hope he didn't kill them all for it. Outside, the forest screamed. At first, it was a whisper, a low hum that the trees seemed to echo. Then the wind snapped. Then came the roar. Guards dropped their weapons. The trees bowed. And, from the deep of the rift, something moved. Fast. Too fast. Kaelen came like the world breaking. He didn't crawl. Didn't stalk. He burst through the boundary stones, through the scent wards, through the bone gates lined with ancient protection spells. He crushed the outer wall. He shattered the old pillars. He didn't look for soldiers. He looked for her. Inside the temple, the ceiling cracked. Stone dust fell across Solenne's bound body, her eyes wide now, her lips parted, but no scream left her. She didn't have time. The wall behind the altar exploded. He stood there, framed in red dust and ruin. He had never looked bigger. His eyes burned like suns caught in agony. And he didn't roar. He growled. Low. Dangerous. Personal. Like a sound meant only for her. The priests screamed. One ran. Another tried to finish the ritual, pressing a blade to the hollow beneath her ear. Kaelen moved. In one breath, he was over the altar. His claw pierced the priest through the chest and drove him into the ground so hard the floor cracked. Another lunged at him with a blade etched in holy script. Kaelen backhanded him into the far wall. He didn't kill the rest. He didn't need to. They fled. He looked down at her. Solenne blinked. Her voice came rough, half-broken. You broke through the walls. He didn't move. Just breathed. Rough. Shuddering. His claw hovered over her bonds. Then, slowly, he sliced the ropes. Each one fell away like silk. She sat up. Her skin bled from a dozen shallow cuts. The ritual hadn't started fully, but it had marked her. Her breath shook. Kaelen's eyes followed her hands as she reached to her temple and wiped blood away. She whispered, "They were going to make me part of you." He didn't respond. Not with words. But he bowed. Slowly. As if acknowledging something sacred. She reached for her sleeve. Pulled out a leaf. Pressed it to her lips. And blew. The sound came soft. Full. Alive. He knelt. Not like a beast. Not like a weapon. Like a man who remembered what kneeling meant. Far above, in the watching tower, Queen Morelle's hands trembled for the first time in a decade. She looked at her son. Auric's face was pale. He said nothing. But his eyes said it all. We made a god. And he doesn't need orders. He only needs her. Chapter 11. The Feast of the Crowned. They dressed the girl in silver silk before they bled her. She was perhaps 16. Her cheeks bore the bruised flesh of royal blood poorly hidden. She trembled as the priests led her up the spiral path toward the beast ring, her feet bare, her mouth sewn shut with a thread of white gold. Behind her, the wind carried the hum of the rift like a waiting throat. Queen Morel sat high in the crescent citadel, her eyes fixed on the scene below with dispassionate calculation. Her fingers played absently with a pendant shaped like a wolf's tooth. Beside her, Prince Alric leaned into the balustrade, eyes shining with cold curiosity. "She's from House Sorel, isn't she?" he asked, gesturing toward the girl. "One of the last pure bloodlines," Morel answered. "They won't be missed. Let's hope her death buys us more than her life ever would." Morel didn't respond. Below, the beast ring pulsed. It had once been an amphitheater, used for trial by blade matches and executions. Now it bore the marks of something darker: gouged stone, splintered rails, claw scars carved in concentric circles. In the center, where fire pits once blazed, blood now pooled. The girl was brought to the center. The priests began to chant. At the edge of the arena, shackles rose from the ground like metal vines. She was tied standing, her arms outstretched, her head tilted to expose her neck. There were no last rites. No prayers. Only silence and a knife. A single cut opened her from collarbone to navel. The blood poured freely. Not in streams. In rivers. The priest backed away. And the ground trembled. He came. Kaelen burst from the rift's mouth with a snarl that split the sky. Trees bent. Dust followed. And then flesh. Muscle. Bone. A thing no longer possible to call man. He landed in the ring like a judgment. His breath steamed. His claws twitched. And his eyes, they weren't looking at the girl. They were looking past her. But the scent called him. He advanced. She didn't scream. Couldn't. He towered above her. Then struck. Not gently. Not slowly. With hunger. With purpose. The girl disappeared in less than a second, consumed in pieces, her blood swallowed before it touched ground. The silk caught on one thong, fluttered, and then burned against his skin. The change was immediate. Kaelen reeled back, his body buckling. From beneath his skin, red veins burst outward, crawling like lightning across his chest, his arms, his back. His claws cracked open further, split, reformed. His breath came faster, louder. Eyes widened too wide. He began to pace. Not in circles. In violent spasms. His body lashed against the walls of the arena. Stone cracked. Dust lifted. The priests scrambled to retreat, screaming incantations. Alric leaned forward. "Is this working?" "No," Morel whispered. "This is something else." Kaelen's growls turned to howls, short, guttural blasts of sound that bent the trees and rippled the stones. He couldn't stop moving. The blood of the royal girl had awakened something in him, not calm, not obedience. Power. Unstable. Burning. And still, something was missing. He snarled toward the edge of the arena. And from the shadows, they brought her. Solenne. Draped in rags, her feet caked in ash, her face bruised from the bindings that had only just been removed. The guards shoved her forward. She stumbled. Her arms were bound again, this time only by ritual, a silk thread that meant nothing, held by nothing. But when she walked into the arena, everything stopped. Kaelen went still. The red veins pulsed brighter, then dimmed. He stepped forward. Slow. Measured. No roar. No rush. Only breath. Solenne lifted her chin. She didn't cry. Didn't speak. She watched him move toward her like a storm that forgot how to break. He circled her once. Twice. His breath hitched. And then he leapt. The priest screamed. Alric stood. Even the queen's hands tightened. Kaelen lunged at her. But he didn't strike. He landed between her and the guards. Spun. Snarled. And raised his body in front of her like a shield. Solenne didn't flinch. She stepped forward. Pressed her fingers, blood-crusted and shaking, against the edge of his claw. He didn't move. But his shoulders trembled. From the stands, the priests were silent. Alric cursed. Queen Morel stood slowly. This is not control, she murmured. No, one of the scribes whispered. It's preference. Worse, someone else added. It's attachment. He knows her. No, Alric said, voice low, eyes locked on the shape of the monster pressed against her side. He doesn't just know her. He doesn't let anyone else touch her. They watched as Kaelen turned again, and with a low, thunderous growl, began to circle Solenne anew. Not pacing, guarding. That night, as the towers dimmed and the forest stilled, Solenne returned to her cell with blood on her fingers and dirt in her lungs. She could not sleep. So she sat beside the window and waited. When she looked down, she saw it. Fresh claw marks in the soil below. Not wild. Not random. Letters. S-O-L-E. Not her full name. But enough. A name remembered. A name written in blood. Chapter 12. The Dream Where He Speaks. It was Ash Reed again. Solenne knew it even before the wind changed. The way the air smelled, like old smoke and iron-rich soil. The way the trees leaned, not from storm, but from something deeper, years of carrying the weight of silence. And the stones, too. They hummed in memory, not life. She hadn't seen this place in years. Not since before the noose and the fire. Before her mother's eyes went still. Before they took her name and traded it for ash. But here it was. Intact. Perfect. Almost. The sun filtered through the pines in soft gold bars. She stood at the forest's edge, barefoot, her hem brushing grass she'd only known as a child. The leaves made no sound as they fell. And ahead of her, between the stones, beside the old creek bed that had long since dried, sat a boy. No, not a boy. Not really. She couldn't see his face fully. Shadows clung to him like a second skin, but not to hide him. To protect him. As if the world itself didn't know what to do with something that was almost still human. He sat with his back to her, one leg drawn up, long dark robes draped carelessly over his shoulders. His hands were busy, folding something. Paper. Birds. Her birds. Solenne's breath caught in her throat. She remembered those. How she used to fold them from prayer scraps and let them float downstream before there was no more river. They were never meant to fly. Just disappear. She took one step forward. The boy didn't turn. But he spoke. His voice was low. Raw. Like something unused too long. You, he said, without looking. Come back. Solenne froze. The paper bird in his hand trembled. You dream, he said again. But, you see. He turned. And she saw him. Kaelen. But not the beast. Not quite the prince either. His hair was black and damp, curling at the ends. His eyes, no longer sixfold, no longer inhuman, glowed gold with a dull, flickering warmth. But his mouth was wrong. Split at the edges. Like it had once torn itself wider just to scream. The scars ran down his jaw in jagged lines, barely healed. Still, he tried to smile. It broke something in her chest. I know you, she whispered. He blinked. His voice cracked. Soul. He couldn't finish it. His hand trembled. She moved closer. He didn't flinch. But he looked afraid. Not of her. Of what he might do. She knelt beside him. They sat in the shadow of trees that no longer existed, surrounded by folded birds that had never flown. He stared at his hands. Wrong hands, he muttered. Wrong shape. They make me teeth. Solenne reached out. Touched his wrist. He didn't pull away. Do you remember the forest? She asked. His brow furrowed. Then slowly he nodded. Smell. Pain. And you. He turned his hand over. There, in the palm, was a leaf. Dry. Fractured down the center. She recognized it immediately. One she had used. Or thought she had. He held it out to her. You blew. You made wind come. She took it. Their fingers brushed. His breath caught. Solenne looked at the leaf. Its veins were faint, brittle, but carved, somehow, with something deliberate. One letter. An S. You remembered, she murmured. His voice was a hush of gravel. Your sound, it makes the beast stop. Makes the pain go soft. Solenne felt her throat tighten. What do you feel when I blow the leaf? He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked to her mouth. Then down. He folded his hands tight. Warm, he said, almost too softly to hear. Like sun. Then, like name. A wind passed through the trees. And for a moment, he wasn't broken. Just quiet. I thought you forgot everything, she whispered. I tried. His jaw tightened. Too much scream. Too much teeth. But you. His eyes rose again. You stayed. She leaned closer. Kaelen, she said. He flinched. Don't, he rasped. It hurts. It's your name. It's not safe. She reached up, brushed his hair away from his temple. He sighed into the touch. Like a starving thing learning what it meant not to be cold. She whispered, Why do you still follow me? His fingers clenched into the leaf birds. I want to remember. I want to. He paused, then looked at her with something so human it almost broke her. I want not to be monster. Near you. The world around them shimmered. Leaves fell. Not one touched the ground. She knew the dream was ending. She reached for his face, held it in both hands. He leaned in, not like a beast. Not like a prince. Just a boy trying to speak. Leaf, he whispered. You blow. I hear. His lips moved again. More soundless this time. Mouth-forming shapes he couldn't speak aloud anymore. But she saw it. Thank you. The dream cracked. Light burst from behind the trees. The world shattered. And Solenne woke up gasping in the dark, her fingers tight around her blanket, her body damp with sweat and something else. The cell was silent, except for the whisper of wind. She looked down. At her pillow. There, resting just above the crease where her head had lain. A single leaf. Dry. Faded. And marked. Veins traced an unmistakable pattern. S. Chapter 13. The beast that hungered for her. They started to disappear one by one. At first, no one said the word missing. They called it attrition. Lost to the rift. Voluntary escape, though no girl ever left footprints in the mud, and no one ever returned. The new offerings didn't last more than a day, sometimes less. 2 had been torn apart before they even stepped onto the stone. And still, Kaelen grew hungrier. The priests whispered it like a curse. He's thinning, one said. No matter how much blood we pour. You've taught him to wait, another murmured, and now he's waiting for her. Solenne stood beneath the arches of the south-facing observation tier, arms crossed tight against the chill wind, as the court physicians argued over the measurements of beast tolerance and feed delay intervals. She didn't look at them. Her gaze was on the field below. Kaelen paced like a storm caged in a man-shaped body. Not circling this time, trapped in zigzag steps, too tight to call movement, too erratic to be rest. His claws scraped into stone until red marks streaked after him. He hadn't eaten in 4 days. The silks offered to him went untouched. The guards who approached were warned not to bleed. A scab, a nick, and he would smell it. And yet, when Solenne entered the ring, he stilled. It had become a ritual. They sent her in without weapons. Without armor. With only the dried leaf tucked into the hem of her sleeve and the sound that he still hadn't learned to forget. Today, he met her at the boundary. Not charging. Not growling. Waiting. He was taller now. Whatever hunger did to him, it stretched him first. His shoulders jutted out with too many joints. His spine looked raw where the skin pulled taut from movement without sleep. Veins traced his chest like painted fire. She stepped closer. You're starving again, she said. He didn't respond. Just took one step toward her and inhaled. Her scent. His head dipped low, near her collarbone, breath dragging against her neck. She froze. Not from fear. From recognition. He wasn't looking at her like prey. He was looking like he wanted something he didn't know how to ask for. His tongue darted out once, tasted the edge of a scab on her arm where a priest had mishandled the rope binding earlier. He didn't bite. He didn't roar. He just licked and groaned. It was low, torn, a sound that had nothing to do with fury. She stepped back. He didn't follow. His claws trembled at his sides. Then, without warning, he turned and slammed his head against the stone wall of the ring. Once, twice. Blood burst from the edge of his brow. "Stop," she cried, but he couldn't. Or wouldn't. He smashed himself again, bone against rock, a sound like God's cracking ribs. Solenne reached for the leaf. Blew. The tone broke in the air, fractured at the edge from too much wind, not enough breath. He paused. Head hanging, claws twitching, shoulders rising like he couldn't contain what he was becoming. She whispered, "Please, don't." And for the first time, he whimpered. A sound so small from something so vast it made the world feel tilted. She stayed until he collapsed against the edge of the ring. Didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Just watched her. Kept his mouth closed, as if willing his fangs away. They led her back at dusk. The priest said nothing. Even Ulrich, lounging in the far shadows, didn't speak. He only watched her. Like she was the blade he hadn't expected someone else to carry. In her cell that night, Solenne lit no candle. She sat by the window, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around them like she could hold herself still by force alone. He had licked the blood from her skin, and then hurt himself not to do more. That wasn't love. It wasn't mercy. It was survival. She'd thought, perhaps foolishly, that he was beginning to love her. But now she knew better. He needed her. Because he couldn't not. He didn't just resist the hunger in her presence. He resisted because of her. She was the sound that bought him seconds of stillness. The breath before the break. The pause between devouring. She reached into the crack beneath her cot, pulled out a new leaf, pressed it to her lips. Blew. The sound was short, sharp. A thread of silence wrapped in mourning. Then, from the window, she heard it. A scrape. Light. Careful. She crawled forward, pressed her hand to the sill, and looked down. There. Placed delicately in the blood-hardened dirt where his claws had once traced her name. A paper flower. Folded imperfectly. One petal torn. The center crushed from what must have been claws trying too hard to be hands. She pressed her fingers to her lips. And didn't cry. Chapter 14, when he refused to kill. The sky above the outer gates bled fire. Sentries screamed as the rift-lit horizon cracked open, swarming with shadows wearing the banners of the Silheth bloodline, moons split by claw marks, teeth spiraling from broken crests. Their arrows came first, thick with oil and alchemy, lighting towers like funeral pyres. Then the beasts came, riderless warhounds bred to flay skin from armor, all followed by men with the crescent scars of the enemy's inner oath. Atop the highest citadel balcony, Queen Morelle didn't flinch. "He's ready," she said. "Majesty," murmured a priest beside her, eyes wide with firelight. "He hasn't eaten in." "He's ready," she repeated. Below, the ring cracked open. Kaelen surged from the depths like something cast from the gods' worst forgetting. No chant heralded him. No chain bound him. He came with no call, only hunger. And what came in his path did not live long enough to scream. He tore through the battlefield with such force the trees bent away from his wake. Silheth riders screamed and were silenced. Blood soaked the soil where his claws struck. Bones shattered in his grip like sugar glass. Men burst under his weight. One soldier fired a bolt etched in holy runes, meant to banish Beastin. Kaelen caught it in his teeth. Bit down. Spat it back with enough force to skewer a man through his helm. The queen watched from her tower, lips pursed in something close to a smile. The court behind her murmured in awe. "Beautiful," Ulrich whispered. And then he stopped. On the edge of the red field, where the final line of Silhatha's vanguard knelt in surrender. 6 men, arms bound, faces bloodied. Kaelen halted. He sniffed. The wind shifted. His eyes dilated. And he turned. Not toward the prey. Not toward the queen. But toward the palace. "Why's he retreating?" barked one general. "He's not retreating," Morel said, the first edge of dread slicing her voice. "He's running." Kaelen did not look back. He bounded over the city walls, over bastions, tearing chunks from the ramparts beneath his feet. He left the scent of battle behind, the taste of kill untouched. He didn't roar. He howled. But it wasn't a war cry. It was need. The city bells rang an alarm as the monster charged through the inner circle, heading not for the throne, not for the sanctum, but the East Tower, where Solenne was kept, where the stone was thin with age and stained with the ash of forgotten rites, where she now sat, huddled behind a barred door, heart hammering as the walls around her began to shake. She didn't see him. She felt him. The floor pulsed. Dust poured from the ceiling. And then, boom, he landed outside her tower. She scrambled to the slit of a window, pressed her face against the bars. Outside, moonlight bathed him in silver. He was panting. He looked broken. His skin quivered with restraint. Blood not his own still dripped from his chest, but his claws didn't rise. His teeth didn't snap. He pressed one claw, slowly, deliberately, to the stone of the tower, and curled it. Not slashing. Not tearing. Scraping. S-O-L-E. Solenne's throat closed. She touched her hand to the window, fingers trembling. "Kaelen," she whispered, too soft for the wind. As if hearing her, his head turned. He sank slowly to his knees and bowed. Not as a weapon, not as a king, but as something starving for permission not to become. A growl echoed in his chest. Not rage, not hunger, grief. Behind him, the wind carried voices, alarms, soldiers, priests. And high above, Queen Morel's gaze turned from the field to the palace. "He turned from kill," she whispered. No one dared speak. "He turned from kill," to her. Ulrich's face twisted. "He defied you. He defied command." Her fingers tightened on the balcony edge. "He is no longer a blade. He is a god that answers only to her breath." "What now?" Ulrich asked. The queen's eyes narrowed. "We sever the thread." She turned on her heel. "Prepare the tethering chamber. Begin the binding." "But, Majesty." "Now." In the tower, Solenne pressed her forehead to the stone, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. She understood now. He didn't return for orders. He wasn't a beast seeking command. He was running. Running from what they asked of him. Running to the only thing left that let him remember how not to be a monster. And now, they would take that from him, too. Chapter 15. The Binding That Broke. The altar stank of copper and burned bone. It rose from the floor like a wound carved into the world itself, black stone slick with blood, cracked with runes that had never been meant for mercy. Every inch of it pulsed faintly, a heartbeat not of the earth, but of something caged within it. Solenne stood barefoot on the central ring, wrists locked in cold iron cuffs that pulsed with heat, like the metal itself disapproved of her presence. A priestess smeared her collarbone with ash. Another tied her hair back, exposing the back of her neck for the ritualists to etch the tethering glyphs. No one spoke to her. She wasn't a participant. She was a component. "Hold her still," one of the higher priests barked. "She's already still," muttered another. "Girl hasn't moved since they dragged her in." Above the chamber, tiers of arcane observers filled the crescent gallery. Queen Morel watched in silence, veil drawn, her hands pale and clasped tightly. Prince Ulrich sat with one leg over the other, fingers tapping in a rhythm too calm for what they were about to do. He smirked. "She dies," he said softly to no one in particular, and he breaks. "She lives, and we own them both." The chamber trembled. Not from spellwork. From footsteps. Massive. Closer. The rift was opening. They had baited the altar with the blood of an infant boar. Kaelen's favorite, according to the experiments. They didn't need to wait long. The far gate slammed open like a god's breath catching. Kaelen entered. Not as the weapon they expected, but as himself. Ragged. Hunched. Veins spidering down his throat. Eyes glowing like molten gold doused in oil. He growled once, and the gallery fell silent. But he didn't lunge. Didn't rage. He looked at her. Straight at her. Solenne stood in the center of the altar, bleeding from a line etched down her shoulder where the rune master had slipped with his knife. She met Kaelen's eyes and knew. He was afraid. Of what they were about to do to her. Of what he might become if they succeeded. The lead ritualist stepped into the circle. "We begin the merging," he declared. Kaelen snarled. For shackles rose from the altar's floor, arcane chains wrapped in holy sigils, designed not to contain the body, but the will. They latched onto him. He writhed once, then dropped to all fours. Not submission. Anticipation. Solenne felt it in her bones. The way the air shifted. The way the magic started to hum. They were threading her into him. Her breath. Her mind. Her voice. Not to calm. To control. Her throat clenched. The priestess raised her blade to pierce the seal behind Solenne's ear. Kaelen bellowed. Chains snapped taut. Solenne gasped. And blew. Not a calming note. A counter-harmonic. Rough. Off-key. The kind that shattered crystal in its cradle. The runes faltered. Kaelen surged. The altar cracked. Priests screamed. The arcane field shuddered and rebounded, straight toward Solenne. She didn't move. Couldn't. Then, Kaelen was there. He leapt into the circle before the explosion landed. His entire body curled around hers in an instant, limbs wrapping, ribs expanding, head bowed low. She couldn't see. But she could hear it. The impact. Like mountain screaming. Stone ripped from itself. Light. So much light. And him. Groaning. Not in pain. In effort. He was holding it all in. The explosion hit him like a second death. His shoulder shattered from the blast. Spines burst from his back, uncontrolled. But he didn't move. Didn't flinch. His arms locked around her as the entire altar detonated. When the smoke cleared, only two shapes remained. Her. And him. His massive body slumped. Burned. Bleeding from every seam. But still breathing. Barely. Solenne's ears rang with the silence that follows catastrophe. She crawled forward, cut, seared, barely conscious, and touched his face. His eyes fluttered open. Still gold. Still hers. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she pressed her forehead to the side of his neck, whispering into the warm, ragged place beneath his ear. "You're not their weapon." He didn't speak. He couldn't. But he exhaled. And for the first time, it wasn't smoke. It was relief. The queen stood slowly from her seat. Everyone else in the gallery remained frozen. Ulrich muttered, "He saved her." "Not because she's the key," said one of the priests in awe. "Because she's his." Kaelen stirred. Looked up at them all. And then, slowly, deliberately, he turned. And walked. Out of the chamber. Away from the palace. Back toward the rift. No one stopped him. He didn't run. He just kept walking. Until the shadows swallowed him whole. He left blood behind him. And the softest sound. Not a growl. Not a howl. A whimper. A goodbye. Chapter 16. He no longer waited. They weren't expecting him. There was no blood offering that night. No chance. No ritual. No thread of song humming through the air. Only the soft shuffle of feet as two young guards dozed at their posts near the edge of the eastern watch point, a stone plateau once meant for weather stations, now repurposed into the crude bones of a night offering site. The torches flickered low. The forest was quiet. Then the silence broke. The first man didn't scream. He was gone too fast. The second had time only to turn before his ribs caved in beneath a single, casual swipe of claw. His body hit the wall, left a smear, and slumped without breath. Kaelen stood in the blood pool, his breath heavy, fogging in the sudden cold. He wasn't supposed to be there. He hadn't been called. There was no battle, no hunger rite, no assigned victims. And still, he had come. With her scent still clinging to the shredded cloth he clutched in one trembling claw. The priests arrived too late. The queen's chamber pulsed with crimson alarm stones, and royal mages swarmed to the gates with panic in their eyes. "He's breaking the pattern," one of the warlocks stammered, sweat beading beneath his brow despite the chill. "This is escalation, unprovoked kill." "Is it retaliation for the failed binding?" another asked. "He shouldn't have survived, none of them should have." "He's beyond the chain," someone else whispered. "He doesn't wait anymore." They looked to Queen Morelle. She didn't blink. "Feed him." "But, Majesty." "I said feed him." Now. More blood. More girls. More silks stained red. Solenne had not been told what happened. Only that her presence was required. The guards no longer barked. They didn't shove her, didn't drag her by her arms. They escorted her now, as if the stone beneath their feet might crack if they disrespected her. Or maybe, if they did, he would find out. They led her to the outskirts of the night altar, beneath the shivering stars, and stopped without crossing the ring. She stepped forward alone. She felt him before she saw him. The air changed. Denser. Wet with the taste of something old and iron and hungry. Her breath hitched. He was crouched near the outermost torch. His body was coiled tight, like a bowstring about to snap, but not toward her. Toward himself. His claws dug into the ground, not to anchor. To resist. He held something. A scrap of her tunic, torn in the chaos of the last failed rite. Dirty, frayed. He cradled it like it bled warmth, like it was the last proof she'd touched the world. "Kaelen," she said softly. He didn't move. But his breath changed. Faster. He sniffed the cloth once. Then looked at her. His eyes were not the glowing gold of fury. They were red. From within. Blood vessel rupture. Or rage. Or grief made real in the body. His lips pulled back. Teeth bared. But he didn't snarl. Not yet. She stepped into the ring. Not too close. Not out of fear, but to give him the distance he clearly thought he needed. Behind her, the priests were watching. And the guards. And somewhere above, so was the queen. She didn't blow the leaf immediately. She waited. Waited to see what he would choose. And saw the worst. He lowered the cloth. His mouth opened. And he turned toward the altar, where 3 new girls were tied. Solenne moved. Fast. No plan. Just instinct. She yanked the leaf from her sleeve and pressed it to her lips. Blew. A soft, broken sound, wrong in places, raw in others. But it carried. He stopped. One claw hung midair. Trembled. He turned back. Looked at her. And dropped the cloth. She whispered, "Don't." Not like a command. Like a plea. He took one step toward her. Then another. The guards tightened their grips on spears. Kaelen paused, only a few feet from her now. He could reach her in one bound. But he didn't. Instead, he lowered his head. And knelt. His massive frame folded onto itself, shoulders quivering, claws splayed like broken wings. And then, a cough. Wet. Ragged. He lifted his snout. Exhaled. Blood misted the air. Not from others. From him. His body was devouring itself. His restraint was killing him. Solenne felt something fracture in her chest. This wasn't mercy. This wasn't clarity. This was torment. She stepped closer, so close now she could see the tremble in his jaw, the way his limbs shivered with strain. His tongue darted out once, tasting the scent on her skin. Then he let out a sound like nothing she'd heard before. Not a roar. Not a growl. A broken whine. Like a dog dying in the dark. She dropped to her knees before him. placed her palm against his blood-slicked shoulder. "You're starving," she whispered. "But not for food." He nudged into her hand once, with a gentleness that didn't belong on something made for death. Behind them, the priests murmured. "What is it?" asked a scribe. One of the old seers said quietly, "He's not waiting for orders." "Then what?" "He's waiting to be allowed. Allowed to be near her without breaking. Allowed to exist." Solenne closed her eyes, pressed her forehead against his, and blew again. The melody was brief, but he wept. She felt it. His body shook. And still, he did not bite. Chapter 17, The Enemy That Whispers. The dream came with no warning. No shift in breath, no tremble in the walls, no hint of dread. One moment Solenne lay curled on the straw-stuffed cot, her fingers still warm from brushing the paper flower Kaelen had left her the night before. The next, she was standing beneath the trees of the Ashreed Woods. It was early spring, as it had always been in her memories of that place, everything damp and green and too soft to be real. Her boots left no prints on the moss. The wind was cool, but didn't touch her skin. And ahead, past the wildflowers that never wilted, someone waited. She thought it was him. He sat by the edge of the brook where she used to fold paper birds. A man, tall, robed in dark fabric that rippled like smoke. His hair was raven black, longer than she remembered, loose around his shoulders. His hands were pale and long-fingered, resting on his knees with a strange stillness. She couldn't see his face, not clearly. But when he looked up, her breath hitched. Golden eyes. Fractured lips. That same broken grace, like a man trying not to shake from the effort of staying whole. "Kaelen," she asked. He smiled. Not widely. Just enough. "You came back," he said. His voice was low and strange, like she was hearing it through a layer of water. "I waited." She walked toward him, cautious. "You look different." He tilted his head. "I dreamed myself better." Her brows pulled. The Kaelen she remembered, if remembered was even the right word, never used words like that. Not so fluid. Not so perfect. She stepped closer. "Why are we here?" He stood. She stiffened, ready for claws, for the familiar weight of the beast behind the man, but none came. Only arms. Hands. He reached for her cheek, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was warm. Too warm. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered. "Not of me." The voice was soft, curling through her thoughts like incense. "You suffered so long," he said. "And for what? For a creature who only protects because he can't bear to be alone? Who kills to silence the pain of wanting?" She flinched. He stepped closer. His hand slid to her neck. "You don't need him." She stepped back. The trees around them darkened. "What is this?" she asked. "Why are you speaking like you're not him?" The man paused. His eyes flickered, not gold now, but silver blue. Pale and bottomless. Cold. She breathed in sharply. "Who are you?" He smiled again. Wider this time. "I am the truth between names," he said. The breath he never took. The wound he forgot. She tried to step away, but the dream held her. "You're not Kaelen." "No. But I remember him. I remember how he trembles when you whisper. How his mind unravels when you bleed. How his hunger bends when you breathe." She turned, tried to run, but the forest spun. The world folded in on itself. He was everywhere. In front. Behind. Inside. "You think he loves you," the voice whispered. "He feeds because of you. He obeys because of you. Without you, he is nothing." Her hands pressed to her ears. "Stop. Tell me, little leaf, how many girls died while you slept?" She screamed. And woke. Gasping. Alone. Dark. But not silent. There on her chest. A single leaf. Dry. Curled. Its edges torn. Not hers. She lifted it with trembling fingers. On its surface, veins traced a single spiral. A symbol she didn't recognize. Not Kaelen's claw marks. This was something else. Something elegant. Too precise. She turned it over. On the back, scratched in what looked like blood. You dream of monsters. But which one loves you? Her stomach churned. She crawled to the window, pressed her head against the bars, searching the dirt below. No fresh claw marks. No sign of Kaelen. But the wind whispered through the trees. And in her ears, she could still hear that voice. He kills because you breathe. And she didn't know, for the first time, if it was a lie. Chapter 18. He wouldn't eat her. The meat hit the floor with a sickening wet thud. A chunk of thigh, still pink and twitching, landed just outside the gate of the beast's cell, surrounded by the copper scent of fresh blood and the chanting of two priests who had long since ceased to see the divine in their work. Blessed by the black maw, the elder one murmured, lifting the ceremonial knife that had carved the offering. Sanctified for hunger. For war. For the preservation of the crown. Kaelen didn't move. He crouched in the shadows, a shape too large for the barred corridor to contain comfortably. His breath came slow but thunderous, each inhale dragging the blood sent deeper into his chest. The younger priest inched forward. He hasn't fed in 4 nights, he whispered. Majesty commands he eat. We cannot delay, the elder hissed back. The next battle closes. Silhetha's agents circle like wolves. Still, Kaelen didn't move. His claws pressed into the floor. Not raised in attack. Flattened. His head was bowed. His 6 eyes gleamed faintly in the torchlight, focused not on the meat, but on the corner of the wall where her scent still lingered. The elder priest sighed and stepped into the cell ring. Fool. He used the hook to shove the meat closer. The stench rose thick, coagulating like heat in the narrow corridor. Kaelen's nostrils flared. His entire body twitched. One claw scraped the stone. The priest reached toward the meat again. Kaelen lunged. Not for the food. For the priest. The man barely scrambled back in time, robes flaring as the monster's jaws snapped inches from his face. A spray of saliva struck the floor. Restrain him, the elder bellowed, tripping over the blessing bowl. The guards outside didn't move. Kaelen didn't charge again. Instead, he turned. And with one massive forelimb, slammed the bowl of flesh off the altar and into the opposite wall. Blood splashed up the bricks. He roared then. But not like a beast demanding more. It was rage. A scream of refusal. He would not eat. The priest ran. The guards closed the gate. The bars slammed shut. Kaelen backed into the shadows again, body heaving. And then, he bit himself. The sharp, wet crunch of fang into shoulder echoed down the corridor. Another bite lower, near his thigh. Bone groaned beneath the force. Blood spilled freely now, dripping onto the floor from wounds self-inflicted. And still, he didn't stop. Not until his own skin was slick with it. Not until he collapsed against the wall, his mouth open in a low, cracked moan. A sound so human, it froze the soldiers outside the gate. They left. All but one. Solenne had watched from behind the old lattice screen above the corridor, one that connected the upper floors of the tower to the beast-holding chambers. A relic of the palace's original architecture. Forgotten. Not by her. When the priests fled, she moved. Quietly. Quickly. A shadow among shadows. She found him alone. Still bleeding. Still awake. Still breathing. He didn't look up when she stepped into the hallway. Didn't roar. Didn't bare teeth. Just lowered his head further. She stopped a few feet away from the bars. He lay curled at the base of the wall, massive chest rising and falling like waves trying not to break. His claws dragged slowly forward. Not to strike. Not to threaten. To reach. And when the front limb extended, palm upward, she saw the blood-slicked pads of his hand open, wide, empty, trembling. As if offering her nothing. As if showing he would take nothing from her. She stepped closer. Knees folding beneath her, she crouched beside the bars, where the warmth of his breath made her hair sway. You didn't eat, she said. He didn't move. She stared at the wounds. At the torn shoulder. The cracked jaw where he'd struck the stone. "Did you do this to stop yourself?" she whispered. Still nothing. Only breath. She reached between the bars. Touched the edge of his claw. It trembled beneath her fingers. Her voice shook, barely audible now. "You're afraid of yourself." His body jerked, a single spasm of what might have been shame. Then, a sound. Low. Hollow. Wet. Not a growl. Not a snarl. It was a whimper. And then, worse. A noise that rose and broke. A sound like crying, but twisted through lungs that no longer knew how to sob. He dragged his bloodied body closer, the bars groaning under his weight. His forehead pressed to the iron. She rested hers against it. On either side of cold metal, two warmths pulsed in rhythm. One girl. One monster. Both trying not to be destroyed by what they had become. "I don't want you to suffer," she said softly. "You're not meant to die starving." He didn't respond. But she could feel it. The war behind his breath. The pain under his silence. He would not feed. Not if it meant losing her. Not if it meant becoming the thing she feared. He would die first. A moment later, the corridor shook. He moved. Rose on trembling legs. Turned. And with a guttural growl, slammed his shoulder into the gate. Once. Twice. 3 times. The bars split. Iron groaned. Not open enough to flee. Just enough for him to slip through. But he didn't. He just stood there, half in, half out. Breathing like he was drowning. Like he had crawled to the edge of freedom and didn't know whether it would mean saving her or killing himself. Chapter 19. The mark he gave her. They bound her with golden wire. Not rope. Not chain. Gold thread, braided from ceremonial coils stored deep within the archives of the Rift Temple, woven by bloodline seers, kissed by spells of binding that had once kept kings from madness and monsters from gods. It was soft, deceptively so, but once knotted, it sang with power. Not to restrain strength. To erase will. Solenne couldn't move her arms. She lay pinned against the cold obsidian seat of the high ritual throne, robes torn from shoulder to waist, spine arched against stone slicked with the oils of old rites and older mistakes. The torchlight flickered with no breeze. There was never wind in this place. Not even when people screamed. The priests moved in silence. Their faces were masked. Not from shame, but from precision. Hiding emotion was necessary to draw the Beastmaster's sigil. The queen watched from above, behind a lattice of bowwood. Auric stood at her side, leaning with one shoulder against the rail, face unreadable. "She must be the anchor," Morel said quietly. "Nothing else works. Not chains. Not oaths. Not spirit stamps. Only her breath." Auric glanced down. "She's bleeding." "Then she's almost ready." The head priest approached with the branding rod. At the end of it, a curved engraving shimmered with heat, etched in the shape of an elongated leaf, its tip curling like a claw. This was no tribal design. No sacred glyph. It was his. Kaelen's claw mark, stylized into a tuning symbol. Solenne tried to twist her neck. "Don't," the priest muttered, pinning her down by the nape. He dipped the brand into the hearth fire. It hissed. She flinched. Footsteps. The first sound anyone heard was stone cracking. Not from ritual. From force. Then the door. It didn't open. It exploded. Kaelen burst through the outer sanctum, not with roar but with velocity, ripping the side wall into rubble with a single shoulder slam. The nearest guards barely had time to raise weapons before they were gone, one flung across the room, another smashed underfoot. The third screamed as claws found him mid-turn, rending through steel and bone like wet paper. The queen didn't speak. Didn't flee. Only whispered, "Let him see." Kaelen didn't hesitate. He knew. He charged through the flame-circled sanctum, bounded up the stairs to the throne where Solenne still lay bound, eyes wide, arms crushed under ceremonial wire, breath trapped in her throat. He stopped. Looked at her. Then the branding iron. Still glowing. Still poised. He snarled. And didn't aim for the priests. He aimed for the symbol. With one savage sweep, he knocked the brand from the priest's hand, sent it spiraling into the wall, where it embedded hissing into the far pillar. The scent of scorched magic filled the room. Then, he turned to Solenne, lowered his head, and gently, very gently, his tongue swept across her back. She gasped. Not in fear. In shock. He licked again, slow, deliberate, cleaning the streaks of blood left by the ceremonial blade's first slice, tracing the arc where the brand would have gone. His mouth was soft. His breath warm. It wasn't a gesture of domination. It was a claim. One not taken by force, but offered in defiance. She closed her eyes. Felt it. The silence of the temple held its breath. And Kaelen slowly began to carve. Not into her skin, but into the wall behind the throne. His claw etched a pattern, lines long and tapering, curling into a leaf with spined ribs and a broken stem. Her leaf. The one she always used. The one he knew. When it was finished, he stepped back, breath heaving, eyes still locked on hers. And she understood. He wouldn't let them mark her. He had already done it. His way. He turned, looked to the queen. She nodded. Guards did not approach. None dared. Kaelen turned again, grazed his claws gently over the wires binding Solenne's wrists. Then, with a soundless snap, cut them free. She collapsed into his arms. He held her. She clung to his fur-streaked chest, trembling, not from fear, but from what she had nearly lost. She buried her face in his shoulder. "I'm yours," she whispered. But not like property. Not like sacrifice. Like choice. He pressed his jaw to the side of her head. Didn't growl. Didn't howl. Only breathed. And it was enough. From above, Queen Morel stepped away from the rail. "Prepare the final fusion," she said. Ulrich frowned. "You saw what he did. He protects her. Not the crown. This isn't control. It doesn't need to be." Her voice was flat. "They're bonded. That's all that matters." She didn't smile, but her eyes gleamed like a flame inside a sealed jar. "Tomorrow, we end this. They fuse. No more separations." Ulrich watched the girl cradle the beast, and the beast lower his head like a lover unsure of how to be held. "What if it breaks him?" he asked. The queen didn't blink. "Then we will rebuild him. Again and again. Until he kills when told, and loves no one." Chapter 20. The Dream Where He Smiled. The wind in the dream was warm. That was how she knew it wasn't real. Warmth didn't live in the world anymore. Not where she was. Not where he was. The rift never held sunlight, and the palace stones had long forgotten the taste of summer. But here the wind carried the scent of river reeds and crushed blossoms, and the lake didn't bleed. Solenne stood at its edge barefoot, toes sinking into the silted shore of a place she remembered only through ghosts. The lake of her childhood, Oshried's mirror water, untouched by violence or mourning. She hadn't dreamed of it in years. And across from her, on the far bank, he waited. Not as the beast. Not fully. He looked wrong. Too human. Too soft. Kaelen stood barefoot, his shirt half unbuttoned, collarbone shadowed in moonlight. His trousers were the ones from the early days, before the transformation, creased with travel and stained at the knees. His hands hung by his sides, twitching once in a while as if waiting for commands that never came. He looked at her. And he smiled. Not a grin. Not the sharp, predatory pull of lips over teeth. A real smile. Gentle. Unsure. Touched by a kind of wonder that made her breath catch. "You remember this place?" she asked, her voice thinner than she wanted it to be. "I tried to," he said. It was his voice. Low, careful, but steady. She stepped closer to the lake's edge. So did he. His feet left no prints on the sand. Hers did. She watched him. "You kill every day," she said. "For me." He didn't flinch. "Would you stop," she whispered, "if I asked you to?" His throat bobbed. He looked down, then up again. His eyes weren't gold now. They were clear. Pale blue with a rim of gray, his eyes, from before the curses and the bindings and the screams. The eyes that belonged to a man, not a monster. "I don't know if I could," he said. She bit her lip. He stepped forward into the shallows. "I never wanted to kill," he said softly. "But they gave me teeth and took my hands." His voice shook. "But I chose not to eat you." Silence stretched between them. Then, very softly, he added, "If I have to be a monster, let it be for that." She felt the breath lodge in her chest. He walked through the water. Not fast. Not with hunger. With reverence. "I don't know how to be near you without ruining it," he whispered. "Without waking up and remembering all the ways I am not this." "You are this," she said. He stopped 2 steps away. "Then why can't I hold you?" His hand rose, shaking. He reached for her cheek. She tilted her head. Let him come closer. But before he could touch her, his fingers curled and split. The nails darkened, lengthened. Claws burst from beneath the skin, cracking through bone like a scream. He gasped, dropped to one knee, gripping his wrist. "No, no, not now." His voice fractured. The lake trembled. Waves rose without wind. "Kaelen," she whispered, kneeling beside him. He hunched forward, arms over his head, body convulsing. "You should go," he growled through clenched teeth. "He's coming." "Who?" A shadow moved behind the trees. Far, but watching. Not a presence that belonged to the lake. Not Kaelen. She turned. But the dream began to splinter. Cracks ran through the sky like shattered glass. The lake rippled in reverse. The scent of blood began to seep into the water. Kaelen looked up. His mouth split at the edges. Not in hunger. In agony. "I don't want to wake up," he said. "You have to." His eyes searched hers. He tried again to reach for her. And this time, their fingers brushed. Just barely. And then the dream collapsed. She woke gasping, sweat cold on her spine. The cot creaked beneath her weight as she rolled to the window, pressing her palm to the bars. No sound from below. The night was heavy. Still. She started to turn away. And stopped. There, just under the ledge, placed with trembling precision. A paper bird. Its wings folded delicately. Tucked between them. A dry leaf. Crossed like an X. Her breath caught. She remembered this. A bird. A leaf. A child's game in Ashreed. She used to say it meant, "I remember happiness." She touched the window. Let her fingers trace the shape of it through the iron. He remembered. Even in dreams, even in pain, even with claws where fingers should be. He remembered her joy. And in the silence, something broke quietly in her chest. Not grief. Not fear. Love, maybe. Or something worse. Something that said, "You are what keeps him from becoming nothing." Chapter 21. The Beast They Couldn't Cage. The sky bled violet by the time the first screams rose. It had begun as a skirmish, just another flicker of Silhetha's shadow slipping across the border of the Rift's domain. A handful of scouts, or so the war priests claimed. But by the time the vanguard was engaged, the scouts had multiplied, sharpened, fought like something blessed with purpose. And the court realized too late that the enemy had stopped testing defenses. They were pushing. By dusk, the Crescent Citadel had sent its most devastating answer. Kaelen. He thundered into the western forest like the curse of a forgotten god. No banner, no horn, no warning. The trees bent. The earth trembled. And from the canopy towers of the watchpost, soldiers turned pale at the sight of him. But he didn't go straight to the battle. He stopped. Right at the outer ring of the citadel wall, where her scent still clung to the stone. Solenne stood there, barefoot, shackled, eyes locked on the black smear of him waiting beyond the ward lines. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Instead, Kaelen lifted his head and howled. Once. Twice. A third time. each deeper than the last. Not a battle cry. Not a signal. Goodbye. Then he ran. What followed was carnage. Silhetha's troops never had a chance. He tore through lines like they were made of parchment. Banners snapped in his wake. Blood painted the trees. Spears shattered against his hide. The ward-etched armor of enemy champions crumpled under his jaws. He didn't fight with precision. He fought like a creature done waiting to be unmade. One soldier managed to land a blade across his ribs. He didn't flinch. He just kept going. Ripping. Slamming. Drowning the forest in screams. By the time the last of the enemy force was broken, Kaelen stood in the center of a red clearing, chest heaving, claws dripping. But the battle wasn't over. Not for him. Because something in him, something kept bound by breath and memory and the leaf-sharp whistle of her, had been frayed in the tide of blood. His head turned. And he saw them. A unit of crescent guards, his own, too slow to flee. Too close. He lunged. Not out of rage. Out of momentum. Out of the echo of fury he hadn't had time to extinguish. 10 men. Crushed before they could scream. The 11th managed to call his name, not the monster's title. Kaelen froze. His jaws halfway to the man's throat. The soldier was sobbing, blade dropped, hands raised. Kaelen stopped. Shaking. And then he roared. At himself. He hurled backward into the trees, slammed his shoulder into bark thick as battlement stone. Let blood pour from his own mouth. He crawled from the clearing and disappeared into the forest. Not one soldier dared follow. That night, the court trembled. And in the high tower of the Crescent Citadel, Queen Morel paced. Her fingers were stained with ink from half-written orders. Her crown sat crooked on her head, and she did not adjust it. Auric stood by the hearth, watching her. He killed 10 of ours, he said. He spared one, she replied. By accident. She didn't argue. He pressed, and he howled for her. That part is useful, she snapped. He won't follow commands, Auric said. Morel looked at him. Her voice was quiet. And now, she said, even I'm afraid of him. Silence. The fire cracked. At last, she lifted her hand. Prepare the locking rite. Auric straightened. You mean? The soul seer, she confirmed. Next rift moon. We purge what's left. The boy. The prince. The memory. And the girl. She lives, until we're done using her. Outside, Solenne stood at her window. Her hands were still streaked with ash. She had seen it all. The goodbye. The fury. The fall. And she knew. They hadn't lost control. They had never had it. They had only ever borrowed the mercy of a creature choosing not to destroy them. And now? He had stopped choosing. Chapter 22, The Last Offering That Failed. The torches burned blue. That was the first sign something had changed. Blue flame meant blood rites. Not the old ones, those had required a circle and a name and 3 days of silence. This was worse. Faster. More desperate. The kind of spell work soaked in royal panic. Solenne was dragged from her cell at dawn, shackled but not blindfolded. They no longer bothered to hide where they were taking her. She already knew. The upper altar. The high one. Reserved for the gods that didn't answer and the monsters that did. They didn't tie her to the post this time. Just dropped her at the edge, iron cuffed to a stone ring and a guard with a spear at her back. Before her, the full grotesque spectacle of the Queen's last command sprawled across the platform, a procession of noble daughters, no older than 16, no younger than 12, dressed in white linen soaked through with oil, their skin inked with spirals of gold and red. They were terrified. Some silent, others sobbing. They were kneeling, shoulder to shoulder, arranged like some holy mosaic of unwilling devotion. A priest chanted. A scribe bled onto the steps. Queen Morel stood at the pinnacle of the stairs, arms outstretched, veil drawn low over her eyes. She looked more statue than woman. Auric was not present. Solenne could feel it before she saw it. Him. The ground began to quake. A heartbeat in the dirt. The priests looked up. The girls screamed. Kaelen arrived not like thunder, but like silence that kills. His body emerged from the far side of the clearing, ribs pulsing, claws dragging as though he had clawed his way from his own grave. He didn't charge. Didn't leap. He just stopped. Before them, a wall of breath and blood and muscle and hunger. The priest stepped back. Morel did not. She lifted a hand. Spoke a word Solenne didn't recognize. The spell activated. The offering girl's garments shimmered, light catching on the sacred oil, igniting a trace line of ancient glyphs carved into their skin. Kaelen flinched. His mouth opened and closed. His eyes swept over the offering. And something changed. He snarled. But it wasn't anger. It was pain. Raw. Wild. He took a step forward. Another. The priests exhaled in relief. But then he stopped. And lifted a claw. To his own face. And tore. Not deep enough to blind. Not hard enough to kill. But enough to bleed. Enough to hurt. Blood ran down his jaw. He turned slightly, his gaze drifting to the side. To her. Solenne. He saw her. And whimpered. A noise so low and ugly it made the girls on the altar flinch and fall against each other. The queen's voice rang sharp. He won't eat. He won't eat. One of the priests muttered, "This is not starvation. It's rebellion." The queen stepped forward. Bring her up. Solenne's chain yanked tight. She stumbled as they pulled her up the steps. Kaelen growled then. Louder. The guards hesitated. But the queen gestured again. And Solenne was shoved to the center of the altar. Directly across from him. No other offerings. No more distractions. Just her. Her. His ruin. His tether. She steadied herself. Her hands trembled. She reached for the leaf she always kept tucked in the hem of her sleeve. Raised it to her lips. And blew. The sound was shaky. Wrong at first. But it caught. Wove through the altar's tension like wind through broken glass. Kaelen froze. His entire frame locked. His claws trembled. He took a step forward. His mouth opened. She could see every sharp edge. Every cruel angle. But he didn't strike. Didn't leap. He stared at her. And for the first time, wept. A single tear, thick and red, slid from the corner of his left eye. Then he turned. And fled. Into the forest. Past the guards. Through the wards. Into the trees that no longer whispered warnings. The altar fell still. Morel's face twisted. Failure, she whispered. But no one dared answer. They all saw it. Kaelen was no longer starving. He was refusing. Refusing to be their beast. Refusing to be her weapon. But refusing, too, to eat anyone not her. Solenne knelt on the stone. She didn't cry. Not in front of them. They led her back to her room. The guards didn't speak. She collapsed onto the stone floor, hands numb from the shackles, her sleeve still stained from the leaf she had held too tightly. She turned her head. And saw it. Etched into the floor beside her cot. Deep, uneven claw marks. 3 letters. No more. Her breath hitched. And for the first time, she didn't know whether the message was for her. Or for himself. Chapter 23. The crown begins to crumble. The first sign of collapse was the silence. Not the absence of war horns or the lull between screams in the dungeons. No, this silence was worse. A political quiet. The kind that bloomed in the halls of power like mold under skin, quiet steps behind tapestries, whispers that stopped when doors creaked, guards who looked away instead of saluting. It had begun. Ulrich no longer sat beside the queen during council. He had taken his seat at the far end of the table, where the silver goblets stayed untouched and his eyes never left the floor. No one questioned it aloud. But even the priests were starting to pray under their breath again. Solenne didn't leave her quarters for 3 days. Not because she was forbidden, but because no one came to fetch her. Not for feeding. Not for Kaelen. Not even for orders. It was as though they'd forgotten she existed, or were too afraid to remember. But she knew better. They weren't forgetting her. They were deciding what to do with her. And Alric, she suspected, had already decided. She had caught him watching her. Not with hunger, but calculation. The kind of gaze that weighed the value of keeping something versus giving it away. And he had someone to give her to. She found out on the fourth night by accident. The lower halls were half emptied of guards. The inner sanctum, once sealed to all but royal blood, had been opened quietly under the veil of moonless dark. She slipped into the back corridor and followed the torchlight. The voices were quiet, but she heard them. Alric first. She listens to him. She doesn't fear him, even now. Then another voice. Low. Silken. Unmistakably not human. Silheth. You want her as bait. I want her as queen. We can both win. A pause. You'd let me take her? Silheth asked. If it means taking the monster with her, Alric replied. And your mother? She's lost her grip. The beast doesn't answer her anymore. The court wants results. And if the girl refuses? She won't. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Silheth said, voice smooth as black ice, then I will visit her. Gently. Solenne fled before they could hear her breathing. She didn't sleep that night. Not for fear of Silheth. Not even for fear of Alric. But for something deeper. She hadn't seen Kaelen since the failed offering. No message. No claw marks. No dreams. No wind. She thought perhaps he had finally done what she had always feared. Let go. But on the fifth night, as she huddled in the tower's lowest floor, her cot abandoned for the cold stone beneath the spiral stair, she found the mirror. It had been covered in cloth when she first arrived. She hadn't touched it. But tonight, something called her to it. It wasn't vanity. It was pull. She unwrapped it. The frame was carved obsidian, blacker than anything in the room, and the glass was dull, blurred as though underwater. She looked in. Saw only shadow. Then, movement. A shape behind her. She turned. Nothing. Back to the glass. A shimmer. A flicker. And there he was. Not the beast. The boy. Kaelen. Or his memory. Or the dream that remembered him. He stood barefoot, shirt half open, eyes wide and pained, hair falling into those eyes like he'd just clawed through battle. Solenne, he whispered. She didn't speak. Her throat had closed. Don't stay, he said. His voice was raw, but it cut clean. Don't let them choose for you. She stepped forward, touched the glass. His hand rose to meet hers, but did not pass through. Only pressed. As though there was a wall between them that neither could break. You'll die, she said softly. I was already dying, he replied. But you don't have to. She leaned her forehead against the mirror. I don't want to leave you. Then don't come closer. A pause. His eyes softened. And then, with a kind of desperation that ached even through the cold reflection, he whispered, Please, Solenne. Run. The mirror darkened. She staggered back. And in that moment, she realized. He wasn't trying to say goodbye. He was trying to save her. From himself. But he wasn't the only one watching. She fell asleep in the stairwell hours later, breath shallow, heart still pounding. And into her sleep, something else slipped. At first, she thought it was still Kaelen. The lake. The paper birds. But this figure was clearer. Taller. Sharper. Silken black robes curled around a frame that didn't carry weight, it glided. And when he stepped into the light, he smiled like someone who had never lost a war. Silheth. But with Kaelen's face. His voice. His eyes. I've waited long enough, he said, offering a hand. Be mine, Solenne. Be queen to something that cannot die. She tried to scream. But in dreams, she had no mouth. Chapter 24, The Dream Where She Didn't Answer. It began with petals. Thousands of them, falling through an endless twilight sky, soft, pale things, neither warm nor cold. They blanketed the ground beneath her bare feet, layered like the pages of a book someone had tried to burn but failed. Solenne stood in the center of it all. She couldn't remember falling asleep. Only the mirror, the whisper, the hand that hadn't quite touched hers. And now this. A forest that wasn't real. A sky that didn't move. And footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. He came from behind like he always did in the dreams, quiet, reverent, as if she were the altar and he the broken worshiper. "Solenne," said Kaelen. His voice was soft. Young. The version of him she only saw in sleep, barefoot, shirt loose, golden hair falling across his brow. No claws. No teeth. Just scars that looked more like old shadows. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I'm not hungry," he whispered. She didn't answer. He pulled her gently against his chest. "I think I dreamed of you long before I became a thing that dreams." She closed her eyes. This was always the moment she broke. But not this time. Because she could feel it. The shift in the wind. The scent beneath the petals, wax and blood and heat. A second presence. Another shadow forming behind her. Not Kaelen's. This one glided instead of walked. It didn't breathe. It loomed. "Am I not the same?" came Silhetha's voice. She opened her eyes. The dream had changed. She stood now between two mirrors, one reflecting Kaelen's face, wounded but warm. The other, Silhetha's, too perfect, too composed, as if carved from desire itself. Silheth extended a hand. "You could be more than prey, Solenne." Kaelen looked at her. "You could be free," he said, as if he believed it too. They both waited. Neither moved. And she understood. This wasn't a dream. It was a test. A choice the world wanted her to make. Between the beast who devoured for her, and the one who would devour with her. But she wasn't a sword to be drawn by either. She stepped back, looked at them both, and whispered the only thing she felt still belonged to her. "I want to wake up." The wind shifted. The petals burned. Silheth frowned. Kaelen stepped forward. His face folded into something too human to be safe. "Please," he whispered. "Don't leave me here." She looked at him. "I'm not leaving you," she said. And then he moved. Not as the dream prince, but as something older, sadder. He wrapped his arms around her, buried his face in her shoulder, and trembled. "I don't want to eat you," he said, and the words were soaked in a grief she couldn't comprehend. "That's all I ever wanted, not to be the one who breaks you." Her hands rose, hesitant, then steady. She touched the back of his head, felt his breath against her neck. "I know," she whispered. The dream shattered. She awoke with a scream locked in her throat. Her body was drenched in sweat. But worse, blood. Her palms were bleeding. Small slivers embedded in her fingers, leaf fragments, crushed in her sleep, their sharp veins slicing her skin. She tried to move. But the pain came first. And then, the sound. Outside her window, the world howled. A cry that cracked the night sky like lightning. Kaelen. He wasn't dreaming. He was calling. Calling as if his soul had split. As if he had felt her bleed. As if he had bled with her. The tower shook. Dust rained from the beams. She stumbled to the window, clutching her hand. Below, shadows gathered like storm tides, and from within them he rose. Massive. Broken. Wild-eyed. He looked up. And howled again. The guards scrambled. The bells began to ring. The queen's fire sigils burst into life across the palace wall. But Solenne didn't flinch. She stood at the bars, hand still bleeding, mouth set. He had reached for her in a dream and failed. But this time, he wasn't asking. He was coming. Chapter 25, The Night Before the End. The sky had turned the color of old bruises. Ash in the clouds. Fire on the horizon. The kind of dusk that didn't speak of rest, but of reckoning. The Crescent Citadel was no longer quiet. Trumpets screamed from the battlements. Messengers rode until their horses died beneath them. The gates were barred, then unbarred, then barred again as orders changed too fast to be obeyed. Panic rode the wind like a beast with its own will. The rift had opened. And Silhatha's army was coming. They had crossed the Blackwash by morning. They had surrounded the southern hills by noon. By twilight, the shadow of the cradled towers flickered under banners that did not bear the crescent crest, but a broken moon, split by a single thong. Solenne stood in the center of it all. Not armored. Not crowned. Not even shackled. They hadn't needed chains this time. Only a whisper. Only a promise. Blow the leaf, the queen had said. One last time. Or he stays in the rift. And we all die. Solenne hadn't answered. She had simply walked to the gates. Now she stood before the edge of the rift, a boundary not marked by walls or sigils, but by air so still it might never have moved at all. Behind her, the palace. Before her, the void. She raised the leaf. It was cracked down the center, veined with old blood. Not his. Hers. From nights spent dreaming, screaming, breaking in silence. She brought it to her lips. Not to obey. Not to command. But to reach. The sound was faint. But the wind heard it. The rift heard it. And then he came. Kaelen. The beast. The prince. The curse-given form. He did not leap from the trees this time. He did not roar. He walked. Slowly. Painfully. Like every step hurt him more than battle ever could. Out of the fog. Out of the endless dark. Toward her. He stopped just before the edge of the seal. Did not cross it. But dropped to one knee, then both, and lowered his head. Massive. Reverent. His forehead touched the ground. He bowed. Not like a creature obeying a call, but like a man praying before his own grave. His body shook. Not with rage. With restraint. His claws dug into the earth, gouging lines into the sacred stone. She stepped forward. One step. Two. The edge of the rift shimmered with heat. He did not lift his head. He trembled harder. Solenne knelt. Close enough to see the strain in his shoulders, the tension in his back. He was holding himself back. From what? From touching her? From running? From devouring the world for her? A wind shifted. Carried a scent. Blood. She looked down. Near his forepaw, where the stone had split. A word. Written not in ink, but in claw. In pain. In defiance. Live. Her breath caught. He had written it for her. Or for himself. She didn't know which hurt more. She touched the letters. Felt the heat still radiating from them. He stirred. Lifted his head. Just enough for her to see his eyes. They weren't gold anymore. Not beast's eyes. Not fully. They were something caught between fire and water. Between the storm and the silence. You don't have to go, she whispered. He didn't speak. Couldn't. But his gaze said it all. I must. The queen's voice rang behind them. Now. The soldiers surged into place. Kaelen did not look at them. Only at her. Always her. Solenne rose. She walked past him. He followed. Like a shadow bound by blood. She did not look back. Because she knew. The end was already here. It had been coming the moment she first heard the wind in a place where no wind should blow. And now it would scream. Chapter 26, The Mouth That Wouldn't Bite. The first line of the enemy vanished before the second even saw them fall. Kaelen descended like a rift in the earth, a living rupture of fang and claw and fury. No formation held. No blade struck true. Where he landed, blood sprayed in arcs across the field. The thunder of hooves and boots was drowned in the sound of bodies breaking. And yet, amidst it all, there was one place the carnage did not touch. Solenne. She stood at the eye of the storm, still, upright, surrounded by horror but untouched. Soldiers screamed her name. Guards shouted for her to run. One mage even began a spell meant to drag her bodily from the battlefield, but it fizzled before it formed. Kaelen had landed between her and the conjurer in the same heartbeat the incantation was spoken. The mage vanished into a mist of crimson and ash. And still, Solenne did not move. Kaelen surged past her, his massive frame a blur of muscle and blood, yet his path curved. He curved. He carved his way through the enemy, then turned. Every pass he made skirted her by inches. Not once did his bulk collide with her. Not a single stray claw came close to slicing flesh. Even as he tore Silhatha's spearmen apart with swipes that could cleave stone, Kaelen's awareness of her position, never wavered. A soldier tripped near her, screaming. Kaelen stepped over both, shielded her from falling bodies with the curve of his spine. It wasn't war. It was worship. The battlefield began to realize it. The Queen's own men faltered at the edges. "Why isn't she dead?" someone shouted. "She's in its path. It's ignoring her." Solenne tuned it out. Her breath was steady. Her pulse barely quickened. She stepped forward as Kaelen dragged down another war beast with a roar that split the fog. His flanks were soaked, ribs shuddering with the force of his movements, blood caking his jaw. Then he turned to her. Paused. Panting. Blood dripped from his mouth. His eyes burned. But they burned for her. Solenne crossed the final few feet between them. The world narrowed until it was only his breath, her hands, and the tremble of silence between heartbeats. He didn't lower his head. She didn't ask him to. She reached up, touched the arch of bone crowning his skull, those jagged, ridge-like protrusions born of curse and rage. He froze. All of him. The air changed. He exhaled, rough and heavy. A sound too close to a moan. His body shuddered. She traced the curve of a spike, the place where it bent just enough to suggest it had once been soft. He leaned into her touch, not like a beast to its master, but like a man trying to remember what kindness felt like on skin he no longer owned. "I'm here," she whispered. He blinked slowly. Like a promise. The clash of armies rolled on in the distance. But here was stillness. Then, she leaned in. Close enough to feel his breath against her cheek. Close enough to speak directly into the space where his name might still live. "Meet me in the deep woods," she murmured. "When this is done." He didn't nod. Not at first. But then. His great head dipped once. A subtle, aching motion. His answer was not words. It was movement. A vow spoken in silence. He turned again. Leapt. Rejoined the war with a snarl that broke the enemy ranks apart like dry twigs. But his path still curved. Still avoided her. He would kill every last soldier on the field. But not her. Never her. And in that moment, with blood raining and steel clashing and the sky groaning under the weight of sorcery, Solenne did not think of the crown, or the queen, or even the boy who had once been Kaelen. She thought only of the beast with a mouth full of death, who refused to bite. Chapter 27. The place where he waited. The forest did not whisper anymore. It breathed. Slow and shallow, like lungs struggling after a long scream. Solenne stepped beneath the first veil of mist as the sun bled out behind her. The trees rose high and black, bark knotted like ribs, leaves fluttering in air too still to stir. The battle had passed. The kingdom behind her was broken, silent, or burning. She didn't look back to see which. All that mattered was ahead, where he waited. Her boots crushed bones. Small ones. Animal mostly. But not all. This was the deep rift. The part even the queen had never dared seal. The ground pulsed beneath her feet like something ancient still dreamed below. She walked for hours. Or maybe minutes. Time did not work right in places like this. But the moment she saw him, she knew she had arrived. Kaelen lay at the foot of an ancient ash tree, gnarled roots twisting into the earth like the veins of the world. He wasn't curled in rest. He wasn't sleeping. He was still. More sculpture than beast. His flanks barely rose. His limbs were tucked beneath him, as if folded in apology. And all around him, Tokens. Memories. Offerings. She froze. Paper birds. Dozens of them. Folded from leaves. Bark. Torn cloth. Set in a wide arc as though circling something holy. A string, knotted and frayed. Her string. From her childhood braid, long since shorn by crueler hands. He'd kept it. Beside it, pages from the book she had once clutched in her cell, only the parts she'd loved remained. The rest burned away, as if he'd removed every word that hadn't touched her smile. At the very center, a leaf. Dried. Cracked. Split perfectly down the middle. She stepped closer. He did not move. Not until she knelt. "Kaelen," she said, voice barely more than a breath. His ears flicked. His eyes opened. Slow. Heavy. Like waking took more strength than war. He did not lunge. Did not growl. He simply looked at her. And in his eyes was the memory of everything he had once been and everything he could never be again. She reached for the paper birds. Touched one gently. "Why here?" she whispered. He made a sound. Low. Softer than she had ever heard from him. Not human. Not beast. Something caught between. Like wind that wanted to speak but had no shape to carry the words. "You brought all of this," she said. He didn't move. She looked around again. This wasn't a nest. It wasn't a den. It was a shrine. Not to her. To them. Every scrap, every fold, every broken piece was a fragment of what he could never say. And all of it told her. He'd been waiting. Here. Where the world ended. Where memory lived. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked. No answer. She stood slowly. Walked toward him. Placed a hand on the side of his skull, just above the largest bone ridge. He didn't flinch. But his chest rose. Shuddered. His breath hitched. Her voice trembled. "Or do you want to die like a man?" This time, he moved. Just his head. He lifted it. Met her eyes. And the sound he made was more wound than word. A low, broken whine, not from the throat, but from the soul. As if saying, "I want you free." Solenne's heart cracked. She sank down beside him, hand still resting on the bone that had once been a brow, now scarred by centuries of silence. "I don't want to leave you." He pressed his head into her palm. "I don't want to watch you die." He didn't argue. But a leaf stirred at their feet. And she saw it. 3 claw marks. Barely there. But enough to form a shape. A loop. A stem. A crude attempt at one last word. "Go." Tears welled. She leaned forward. Pressed her forehead to his. "I'll stay," she said, voice breaking. "Until the end." His whole body trembled. She held him tighter. The night deepened. But neither of them moved. Because in this place, this graveyard of dreams and altars made of silence, they had finally said everything that needed to be said. Without words. Chapter 28. The Monster That Remembered. The war ended before dawn. But the blood didn't. The sky cracked open under the weight of fire and bone. Screams rained down like thunder. Banners dissolved into ashmedare, and armies, trained for 100 years, broke in a single night. Kaelen had come. Not as a man. Not even as a beast. But as the end. Solenne stood at the edge of the city, wind slicing her face like knives, eyes stinging with smoke and silence. She didn't cry. There were no tears left. Only awe and grief and a quiet sense of inevitability. She had followed him from the forest. Through the dying trees. Past the corpses of things with names and things without. She had watched from the ridge as he hit the enemy line like a divine punishment. The rift's breath made flesh. He didn't roar. He didn't need to. He moved like gravity, inescapable, absolute. Tens of thousands had come under the banner of Silheth. An army gilded with the confidence of prophecy. Their spells had shimmered, their beasts were horned and huge, their blades sung with blood enchantment. It hadn't mattered. Kaelen didn't fight. He consumed. And the rift responded to him like it had been waiting. The land cracked behind his feet, trees twisted toward him, the wind sang his name in a language no longer spoken. He swallowed generals whole. He broke siege walls with a flick of his claw. He ripped through the center of their formation like paper. By morning, there were no bodies left to count. Only pieces. And then he turned toward the palace. Toward the heart of the kingdom that made him. Solenne followed. No one tried to stop her. They were all too busy kneeling. Even the guards. Even the priests. They dropped to their knees, eyes wide, lips trembling not in prayer, but terror. And still he walked. Kaelen passed through the inner gates like they weren't there. His body soaked in blood, his movements slower now as if each step cost more. But not because he was dying. Because he was remembering. The throne room waited, gold-lit and hollow, carved in arrogance and cruelty. Queen Morel stood before her seat, Alric half hidden behind her, his sword drawn, hand shaking. Kaelen didn't pause. He didn't roar. He didn't give them the dignity of words. He tore the queen in half. Snapped her mid-sentence. Alric screamed. Tried to run. Kaelen caught him with a single claw. Pinned him to the wall. Watched him writhe. And then let go. Alric slumped, bleeding, gasping. Kaelen didn't finish him. He turned. Walked toward the throne. Stared at it. And crushed it beneath one foot. The crash echoed like thunder. Like judgment. And then he turned to Solenne. She stood in the doorway, unmoving. All around them, the court pressed their foreheads to stone, as if the creature might spare them for cowardice. Kaelen didn't see them. Only her. He approached slowly, carefully, and stopped 3 paces away. Then he knelt. Massive limbs folding beneath him, head bowed, claws splayed on the shattered marble. Solenne stepped forward. Trembling. She raised the leaf. The final one. No blood on it. No crack. Just pale green, lined with silver. She brought it to her lips. And blew. Not a command. Not a plea. A song. Short. Delicate. The leaf spin. The melody he had once sung in his dreams. Kaelen shuddered. His shoulders rose once. Then again. He made a noise. A low one. Almost human. Almost weeping. And then he spoke. Not loud. Not clear. Just a breath, cracking through throat and teeth and centuries of silence. Free. The word trembled through the room. He looked up. And for a single moment, he was beautiful. Not as a man. Not as a beast. But as something finally at peace. Then, his body cracked. Not violently, but gently. Like stone cooling after fire. His spikes dulled. His eyes dimmed. He did not fall. He folded. Into the earth. Into ash. The wind came, not summoned, but natural, and scattered him. No blood. No scream. No thunder. Only dust. And beneath where he'd knelt, in the smear of his final weight, a message carved in claw. Stay, but not for me. Solenne knelt. Traced the letters with her fingers. She did not weep. She didn't have to. He had remembered. That was all that mattered. She stood. Walked out of the hall. Past the kneeling guards. Past the shattered throne. Past the world he'd broken to give her a chance. And into the woods. Where the silence lived. At the center of the rift, she found the place where the paper birds still rested. The string. The pages. And one final leaf. Untouched. She took it in her hands. Brought it to her lips. Blew. No sound came. Just breath. But the wind answered anyway. And the forest exhaled. Chapter 29 After the Wind. The first time the wind moved through the rift after Kaelen's death, it carried no screams. No blood. No scent of fear. Only breath. Clean, cold, unfamiliar, like the world had forgotten to breathe for a century and was only now remembering how. Solenne stood at the edge of Ashreed Hollow, her old village made new by the ruins it had shed. The earth had stopped shaking. The sky was clearer. And the rift, that once snarling wound in the kingdom's heart, lay silent behind her. People no longer avoided it. They planted trees near its mouth. Children chased wind-stirred leaves along its border. And those who'd once knelt before it in terror now passed it with reverence. Because the monster was gone. And for the first time in living memory, no one had died to make that true. Solenne never returned to the palace. The queen was dead. The throne shattered. A new ruling body, hastily assembled by those who'd survived the collapse, called themselves the Interim Assembly. They sent writers, envoys, scrolls sealed with wax and words like commendation, recognition, royal honor. Solenne never opened them. She no longer lived where roads reached. Instead, she built a small house, if it could be called that, on the edge of the rift, where the trees grew too thick for maps, but not thick enough to darken the sun. She did not do it for privacy. She did not do it for peace. She did it because that was where he had waited for her, where he had laid down all his rage, all his hunger, all his sorrow. And because when the wind moved now, it still curled around the stone where his bones had fallen. Children came in time. Not hers. Not by blood. Some were orphans from the war. Some were girls who'd been marked as future offerings before the system collapsed. Some were simply wanderers, drawn to the woman who never raised her voice, who told stories not from books, but from memory. She did not speak of Kaelen by name. But when a child asked about the claw marks on the doorframe, or the leaf etched into the stone by the fire, she would smile faintly and say, "He was someone who remembered me." Sometimes, at night, she would sit outside. The wind always came then, brushing her cheek like a hand that had forgotten how to be gentle. One evening, a girl with wide gray eyes and hair braided the way Solenne used to wear hers asked, "Did you ever love him?" Solenne had paused, looked out across the rift, at the still trees, and the place where nothing dared grow except wildflowers and silence. She had thought of the paper birds, the string, the leaf, the way he had never touched her in harm, and the way he had always waited. "No," she said at last. "I think he loved me more than I ever knew how to love anything. And I think that was enough." The girl hadn't understood then. But she would. Someday. Solenne rose, walked into the trees. She returned to the place. Not often. Not every day. But when the wind rose, especially in autumn, she would carry a stone in her palm. A small one. Smooth. And lay it near the oldest roots of the ash tree. The grave had no bones. Only memory. But it was enough. One day, she carved something there. With a dagger, not a chisel. Jagged. Crooked. But deep. It was not a name. It was not a prayer. It was a truth. He remembered. And beside it, just beneath the moss, she placed the last leaf. Unblown. Unbroken. Because some songs, once heard, never needed to be played again. Chapter 30, The Leaf Song. The leaves had turned the color of old honey, curling at the edges like parchment forgotten too long in the sun. Autumn had come to the forest, not with thunder or war cries or fire, but with wind. Gentle, persistent, remembering. Solenne knelt in the grass at the edge of the old path where the rift once opened wide and terrible. It was only a hollow now. Just trees. Just moss. Just wind threading between roots too ancient to care for kings or curses. She held a leaf in her hand. Broad-veined, dry at the tips, but still pliable. A group of children sat in a semicircle before her. Some squatted with elbows on knees. Others lay on their bellies, eyes wide, breath quiet. They weren't hers, but they came every week to listen. To learn. "Show us again," one of the smaller boys said, clutching a half-torn leaf with too many holes to sing. "Your stem's too short," said a girl with twin braids and a dusty nose. "You need the curve like she has." "I had a curve," the boy muttered, "but I dropped it." Solenne smiled. Not a wide smile, but warm. The kind that had taken years to learn again. "Watch," she said softly. She pressed the leaf to her lips, adjusting the curl at its base with a practiced fingertip. Then blew. The sound was faint. Not music. Not quite. But it carried. Soft as a lullaby sung by the wind itself. The children stilled. Even the birds hushed. It was a melody only a few in the kingdom still remembered. Even fewer knew its name. The leaf song. She finished the phrase and let the silence settle like dew. A small hand went up. "Miss Solenne," said a boy barely 6, his voice hesitant, his front tooth missing. "The monster in your stories. The big one that never ate you. Were you? Did you love him?" The clearing held its breath. Solenne did not answer right away. The children watched her. Some with curiosity. Some with dread. One girl clutched her own leaf tighter, as if the answer might change the way it sang. Solenne looked down. The leaf in her palm was trembling slightly, caught in a breeze that had stirred without warning. She pressed it again to her lips. Blew a single note. Soft. Low. Steady. The wind caught it. Carried it. Somewhere in the trees, it echoed back, twisted faintly, as if remembered by something older than the air itself. She lowered the leaf. Smiled without joy, but not without peace. Then, finally, she said, "He was the only thing in this world that never tried to hurt me." The children were quiet. Even the leaves above made no sound. A few of the older ones looked down, thoughtful. Some didn't understand. They would. In time. Solenne stood, brushing her skirt free of bark and bits of twigs. "Come on," she said. "It's getting cold." They rose in a scatter of limbs and laughter, racing down the old road toward the hollow, chasing the wind and each other, leaf whistles fluttering in small hands. Solenne lingered behind, just at the edge of the forest. She looked back once, toward the place where the shrine used to be. It wasn't there anymore. But she didn't need it to be. The rift didn't need a monument. It had the wind. And the song. And the girl who once walked into the forest to die. And found someone who refused to forget her. Solenne raised the leaf again. This time she didn't blow. She only held it up. Let the wind take it from her fingers. It spun, curled, lifted, and disappeared into the trees. Somewhere, far above, something unseen caught it, held it for a moment, then let it go.